When we left the race on stage 9 in Andorra, it was being assailed by a hailstorm. Back in France, the forecast for stage 10 is cloudy with the possibility of rain. But at least it stayed dry for the Tour's first in-race wedding. Stephanie and Thierry pledging to have and to hold in sickness and in health over Alpe and Pyrenees until one of them is dropped by the main field.
And of course, if we'd known in time, we'd have put our best frocks on. Now, the race resumes today and tomorrow with a couple of key stages in the green jersey.
Cavendish at the front end of the race now. Cavendish is going to do it. Mark Cavendish has done it again. It's between Alaphilippe and Sagan at this point. The world champion, no. He wins. Now Cavendish goes. Can he get past Greipel? It's going to be close. Cavendish and Greipel. Cavendish and Greipel. You cannot split them. Mark Cavendish's face tells the whole story. Back in the green jersey. Cavendish gets there and he takes an extraordinary third win on a Tour de France that is becoming for him a Tour of triumph.
Now, here's how things stand in the green jersey competition coming out of the rest day. Mark Cavendish leads Peter Sagan by 7 points, with Marcel Kittel another 15 points behind. And for a sprinter's day, stage 10 actually takes the riders straight over the highest peak of the entire race, the 2,400-metre Porte d'Envillera. The intermediate sprint is after 122.5 kilometres, and there's a tiny but possibly more important climb 7 kilometres from the finish. The Côte de Saint-Ferréol will decide whether or not this stage ends in a bunch sprint and who's in it. Actually, having said that, what's more important at the moment is who is in the break, because for the second stage running, it's Peter Sagan. He picked up 20 points at the intermediate sprint on the way to Andorra, you'll remember, doing exactly this, and another 20 today would give him an advantage of 13 over Mark Cavendish, heading into the stage finish where there are 50 for the winner. Now, that break, Chris, is already 6 minutes, 54 ahead. That's already gone, hasn't it?
Yeah, you can see by the body language in the peloton that everybody's just let it go now. So this is a real big thing. I mean, today was going to be almost decisive for the green jersey competition because Sagan's got only a few stages left that suit him. He can split himself apart from Mark Cavendish, and this is the one. And he went after it from the get-go on the climb.
Right. So you suspect he will probably pick up the 20 points at the intermediate sprint. However, all is not lost for Cav because he's got a couple of teammates in there, Stephen Cummings and Edvald Boasson-Hagen, who will probably contest the intermediate sprint and are good bets for the stage win.
Yeah, I'm not sure on the intermediate sprint, but certainly for the stage win, they've got that 1.8 kilometre long climb that's 7 from the end. That's going to be really tough. Cummings obviously in there for try and get another stage win, and that would obviously, as you say, aid Mark Cavendish. So I think the fight for the stage win may see Peter Sagan out of it, but he can survive that climb. Just depends how much he wants to fight.
And I mean, it's a pedigree group altogether. Greg van Avermaet, former stage winner and yellow jersey wearer. The two main teams have got a man in there, Mikel Landa for Sky and Izagirre for Movistar.
Yeah, Landa's certainly interesting. I mean, Sky again trying to push somebody else out there. BMC, good to see them getting involved and going on the offensive. Van Avermaet, classics rider, has got to be one of the favourites for today as well.
Yeah, intriguing stage. It looks though as though the break has gone for good. Let's get over to commentary then with David Miller and first Ned Boulting.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, it does indeed look as if that breakaway is up the road now and will be producing the stage winner ultimately, because the peloton have let them go. The gap now just approaching 7 minutes. And David, it's a finish when we arrived in Revel on bikes, I have to say, that suddenly you remembered from 16 years ago last when you raced your first ever Tour de France.
Yeah, it's one of those flashbacks. So just sitting there having a coffee at the bottom of the climb when I remembered from 2000 attacking from behind. The break was already gone, but I was feeling a little bit feisty and went. And looking back at the results, took quite an elite group with me.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. Your first Tour de France, 4th place on that finish into Revel, and it is a proper climb, isn't it? A Category 3 climb. I mean, it's not nothing.
No, it's not at all. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of Box Hill in Surrey. The British cyclists from the southeast will know. It's not very hard, but it's enough to do some damage, as we've seen in the past.
Well, this is the situation on the road now, and there we go. 7 minutes is the advantage for 15 riders up the road, including that man, Vincenzo Nibali, the 2014 Tour de France winner. Tony Galopin is the Lotto Soudal rider. Rui Costa, 3-time stage winner on the Tour de France. Steve Cummings and Greg van Avermaet, as Gary was saying, both men who've already scored on this edition of the Tour de France, and Peter Sagan, the world champion, who really... we understand, before we had live pictures, has animated this entire race virtually from the start, and it was uphill from the start.
No, I mean, we were looking through the information we had on our computers, because we didn't have pictures, like you said, and repeatedly it was Peter Sagan who was attacking from the off, and even when breaks were forming, he'd then be attacking that break, and it was really him that dragged this whole thing away. And obviously he needed to do that in order to cause damage and get rid of his main competition, the sprint competition, the pure sprinters like Mark Cavendish, Marcel Kittel, Andre Greipel, and he succeeded in doing that. And also, I think it caused so much damage that it's taken a while for the chase to begin. And now we can see it's just Team Sky, the GC team, controlling it, which would imply that this breakaway is likely to succeed, because the riders up there, the number that are up there, and they seem to be rolling through well. It's working.
Yeah, nobody going up the road in that 15-man group is really a threat in the general classification. The best placed of the riders is the BMC Mountain Domestique, Damiano Caruso. It's one of 2 BMC riders up the road. As we look further back down and see the German national road race champion Andre Greipel, might have been a good day for him. I suppose it might still be if this does come back, but at the moment you'd have to favour the breakaway. Certainly that final climb would be a climb that Marcel Kittel in particular would not enjoy, and the chances are he wouldn't make that selection over the last Cat 3 climb, I'm guessing, and so it's probably doubtful whether Etixx Quickstep will ride too hard in terms of trying to bring this back together, and certainly they haven't been visible so far at the front of the peloton. The only team who has chased twice very, very hard to control and then bring back this breakaway was Katusha, because Alexander Kristoff, who's really had a nothing sort of Tour de France so far, is a rider who would have made that Cat 3 climb look relatively straightforward and would have been able to contest a bunch sprint. But Katusha just couldn't do anything about the powerhouse 15 riders up the road, and they're all sharing the work as well, including the Dimension Data riders Edvard Boasson-Hagen and Steve Cummings.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I think Katusha must have had in their team meeting this morning that being in the break, being present in the break was imperative, and they missed it, and it looked like they were really getting reprimanded on their team radios and told they had to chase, and because the chase didn't look like something that was very committed or organised, they got on the front panic, and it was what we almost call punishment duty. They were up there trying to rectify their mistake, but it didn't last long, and it made little impact into the time gap. It stabilised it quite quickly. Hence why it's at 7 minutes. Normally at this point you would expect a break of this calibre to have a bigger time gap, but that was because Katusha did stabilise it quite quickly but weren't able to eat into it.
Yeah.
At the moment they stopped riding, Team Sky took control and just let it go out by another minute, because I think Katusha got it to 6 minutes and then that was it, and they couldn't get it any closer, and then gave up.
Well, they actually did 2 shifts. They did a first responsive shift that must have lasted 5 or 10 minutes, and then they all sat up. It was principally Angel Vizioso and Marco Haller who were doing the work. And then they disappeared from the front completely, and Team Sky started to reassert themselves, full of grins and delighted that chase was then over. And then about 10 minutes later, Katusha were back on the front again. So that was probably a reaction from their director sportif.
Yeah, for sure. The director got on the radio and said, "Why have you stopped riding? Get back to the front." And then they'll have regretfully gone back to the front and been half committed and given up. They'll be in a fair amount of trouble this evening, that's for sure, and no doubt we'll see Katusha all over the front of the race tomorrow trying to rectify their missed day today. But at the same time, the group that's up the front is filled with an exceptional list of riders, and there are a couple of teams there that are present that I think that's quite surprising actually. So you have Orica Bike Exchange, who have 3 riders there, with Daryl Impey, Michael Matthews and Luke Durbridge, and they're on the front now, as you can see, and that's Luke Durbridge on the right and Daryl Impey on the left. We know Daryl Impey's on stunning form, and normally this would be a perfect day for him, but with Peter Sagan in the group and Edvard Boasson-Hagen, who are probably more likely to beat Daryl Impey in the sprint, they're going to commit to Michael Matthews, who is a fantastic sprinter on his day, who we see the second last position of the group there. So that's one team that really wants to make this work, and Dimension Data have 2 riders up there, and they would have had the choice, if you like, of not riding. They could have sat Edvard Boasson-Hagen and Steve Cummings on the back of that group and said, no, we're not riding, we've got Mark Cavendish behind. But if they were doing that, then the team would have to chase behind. And by the looks of it, they've cut their losses. They've decided to. Mark Cavendish has called that he's not interested in today's race, and Edvald Boasson, who we see there in third position in the Aero Cup, is their man for today.
You can see they're descending in the rain at the moment. There's a huge aggregate drop in altitude out of the Pyrenees and into the flatlands of the Languedoc, passing through these various départements of the Tarn and the Haute-Garonne and the Ariège and the Aude. Beautiful part of France. A total change in the topography in this part of the world, and a total change of the weather as well. We're hearing rumours of exceptionally hot temperatures in the southern capitals of Rome and Madrid at the moment, but look at this. It's drizzly and it's in the low 20s at best at the moment in the Languedoc, which is very, very unusual, it has to be said. So, rain jackets on as they pass through this part of France and make the junction, as they do in the middle week so often, between the Pyrenees and the Alps. That's where we're heading. A few transitional stages. Mont Ventoux looms large on Thursday, but for today it's a chance for the Puncheurs, a variety of different riders capable of winning today. The breakaway, 15 riders are over 7 minutes up the road. We're going to take a break. Welcome back. The world champion, deep in conversation with Gorka Izagirre from Movistar, thinking about the finish line he's got in mind, the first of two. That's an intermediate sprint just under 10 kilometres up the road in the village of Aigues-Vives. But, interestingly, David Miller, there's been a slight shift in the way the race looks, and that's because you can see from the helicopter that the peloton once again is all strung out, and another team has come up to the front alongside Team Sky, who were just controlling the pace, and they are riding, and it's IM Cycling.
Yeah, it seems to be one of those days where teams this is often what happens at Tour de France as the race unfolds. Teams find themselves under more pressure and under more stress to perform, and will get themselves involved in chases that they wouldn't have normally got involved in because they haven't achieved anything yet in the race. And IM is one of those teams, and Katusha as well. They haven't got a big result yet, and so every day there's more pressure. They have to get in the break, and if they don't get in the break, then they have to chase it down as part of their punishment, if you like, but also just to rectify the situation, because they're feeling the pressure. The direct sportee's feeling the pressure from the sponsor, and then the direct sportee passes it on to the riders. But it's at the moment neither of these things look calculated. Why didn't IM should have gone and worked with Katusha, or go and talk with Katusha again now and say, look, we'll help you if you go back up there. We'll put 2 riders in, 3 riders each, and get this done. And that's what normally the team road captains do. They go and discuss this. But at the moment, it looks like director sportifs sort of telling them to do it, and there's not really any thoughts gone into it.
That is ancient, by the way. The Abbey Castle of Camon goes right back to the 800 AD, 778, when the future Emperor Charlemagne, on his return from Spain, is said to have ordered the construction of the monastery. Several times it's been flooded throughout its history and rebuilt. Absolutely beautiful, though, and this is an ancient part of France. The scene, of course, of the Catholic religion and the various routes that befell that community and that religion down the years, persecuted by the Catholic Church. And normally bathed in sunshine down here. Spring, the wildflowers are out and the verges, but they are dappled with a light rain. It's not cold, but it's certainly not warm. So as you can see, the advantage has come down again. It's under 7 minutes. Greg van Avermaet leading Peter Sagan and 13 other riders into a pace line. They've been working well together. Every rider doing a turn on the front, pretty much. And what a high-powered group it is as well. Number of former wearers of the yellow jersey. 6, in fact. I wonder if we can name them all. Vincenzo Nibali, he's worn the yellow jersey. Darren Impey, Peter Sagan, Greg van Avermaet, and Tony Gallopin. I think that's a lot. And 9 former stage winners, including this man, Edvald Boasson. Tony Gallopin, he's a former stage winner, so too is Vincenzo Nibali and Peter Sagan. Steve Cummings is in that category now with his 2 stage wins this year and last year. Rui Costa, Sylvain Chavanel, Sam Dumoulin, the rider from AG2 à la Mondiale, who won stage 3 back in 2008. Darren Impey is also, I don't know if I mentioned him, a former yellow jersey wearer, the South African who rides for Orica Bike Exchange. So there you can see right at the front, there's just one solitary rider from IM Cycling leading out the Team Sky train, who are not contributing to this chase at all. And Katusha, they're still prominent towards the front, but not actually sharing the work with IM Cycling at the pointy end. So really, there's two riders there. Those two riders against 15 committed and some of the best in the Tour. And it looks like it's a fairly fruitless task. They're going to need help.
Well, it makes no sense to me that Katusha aren't back up there helping them. Katusha obviously gave up because they weren't closing it down enough and felt that they were being taken advantage of by the peloton. Here they are, Katusha's passing. They're still present at the front. They should get back up there and try and close this down now, rather than just leaving it and letting it go. But maybe the Direct Sportive just decided that discretion was a better part of valour.
We just caught a glimpse of another couple of teams who've missed out completely on the break and do have riders who you would think would go very well in this final, and that is Giant Alpecin, who of course have John Degenkolb in their troops, and it might well suit a fit Degenkolb. He's not looked necessarily on sparkling form as he returns from injury, but he gets stronger every day, and it's interesting that Giant aren't helping this chase. And Trek Segafredo, they've missed out as well, and they've been placing Edwin Toons highly in the sprint. Don't know how well he'd go over that climb necessarily, but Fabian Cancellara might fancy a dig himself, so they might consider joining in and helping IM Cycling.
Even Stuyven, who won in the Vuelta last year in a sprint after a climb, so he's capable of that for sure. So it is a bit strange.
But all the time that it's hovering around about 6 or 7 minutes, it's not gone definitively with the number of kilometres left. So there is that possibility. It's not been decided how this is all going to end up just yet. We're edging towards that kind of territory as we look at the ruins of the castle of Lagarde, dating back to the 11th century. The Versailles of Languedoc, it was once known as, and during the French Revolution it was sold and then pillaged. Its stones built some of the houses in the new village. However, it's been a ruin for hundreds and hundreds of years, but in the 1990s a small team of volunteers tried to save it, and they're still doing it at the moment. So these days an association of volunteers are trying to put it all back together again, and there's work going on even as we speak on site. Maybe not in the rain, maybe they've called it a day.
Trying to work out who I am would be racing for. I mean, Lee Howard would be the obvious because he is a very fast sprinter, but it's yeah, not really too sure on what the reasoning is for it.
Well, it's a bike race as they pass through the banner marking 10k to go, and if you're not in the breakaway, you know, you're not really going to feature in the race, so you might as well, if you're going to ride and do what you can, and then take your chances with whoever feels strong.
No, exactly, but like I said, I think the only chance they have of bringing this down is because they have it stabilised now at 6:45, but they're riding at exactly the same speed as the group in front. That's 15 riders off the road who are, as we've spoken about, an incredible pedigree. And you're not going to bring that back with two riders. They need to put 4 or 5 riders up there. They need to speak to Katusha, Trek. They need to rally it all together and get as many as possible. And so 2 riders going to 15 at the moment. They're stabilising it, but with 78 k's to go, the majority of which flat, they're going to need to bring that down quickly.
Yeah, they can only go at this pace for so long, and they'll blow up at some point if they don't get help. Jérôme Coppel, one of the 2 riders from IM Cycling. Day before yesterday, we saw him in the breakaway. I think it was Martin Elmiger as well, the other rider working for IM Cycling. Might be wrong about that, but certainly Coppel was one of those 2 from IM Cycling, trying to hold off the 15, and actually, to some extent, succeeding at the moment as the gap comes down to 6.5 minutes now. What effect will this intermediate sprint that isn't too far away have on the breakaway, David? Because Peter Sagan, this is his primary objective of the day. Of course, he'd be a strong favourite to actually win the stage as well, but he wants these 20 intermediate sprint points to take the green jersey off the shoulders of Mark Cavendish on the road. Will he then sit up a little and sit on?
I think yes and no. I mean, he was the one that forced this move away, and everybody in this group knows that he wants to win those points. There's only one rider, I think, that will try and, or 2 riders that will try and combat with him, and that's the Dimension Data riders. Not necessarily because they want the points, but in order to gain the points to take anything away from Peter Sagan and protect Mark Cavendish. Everyone else in the break, I think, will be quite happy to let Peter Sagan go across the line first. After all, they know that he's the one that essentially forces move and wants those. And this is the perfect scenario for Peter Sagan. A group of 15 means that almost all the points are gone, so that the peloton won't be getting any behind. And then we're at a point now where it's looking highly likely this move will make it all the way to the finish, which again will take almost all the points away on the finish line, depending on who's caught from this group or not. So it's working out so far perfectly tactically for Peter Sagan. And of course, even if he takes the points, it won't be the hardest sprint he's ever done. Then he will switch, no doubt, to wanting to win the stage as well. But out of all the riders in the group, he's done the most work so far, because we read that on the first mountain, it was relentlessly Peter Sagan ripping the race to pieces.
Which really makes no sense. That was a 22-kilometre climb.
It's outstanding. I mean, it's ridiculous, to be honest, to think that Peter Sagan can do that. And that is, we've seen over and over again, there's nobody, even the climbers would have had difficulty staying with him up that climb, which we saw. And it's one climb, it's at the beginning. He seems to be capable of matching the best climbers in the world in that situation. Obviously, as the day goes on and there's more climbs towards the end of the race, etc., it gets harder for him, which is natural, because he's not a climber. He's an all-rounder, he's a sprinter, but he's simply too big to do the repeated climb. But yet on one climb he seems to be able to do it magnificently.
Luke Dobridge from Orica Bike Exchange leads the breakaway of 15 riders under the 1 kilometre to go to the intermediate sprint, where Peter Sagan, in about 5th or 6th place in that line, is the strong favourite. Watch out though for the Norwegian jersey of Edvald Boasson-Hagen, who will be working to protect Mark Cavendish's position, we think, in the green jersey competition, and he probably will be trying to take points from Peter Sagan in 900 metres time. So Sagan sitting tight for now. Steve Cummings is in third place there, Darrell Impey as well, and Michael Matthews is just sitting on the wheel of Peter Sagan. And Matthews is featuring in the green jersey competition. He's on 77 points as things stand, in 7th place. Greg van Avermaet might show a little bit of interest as well. He starts today in 5th place on 90 points. But it's the rainbow bands that draw the eye. When's he going to make his move? Moving up the outside now with 300 metres to go. How hot is this going to be contested? Or are they all going to allow him just to ride off the front? Seems to be the way.
Yeah, so that's as much respect as anything else. Michael Matthews just sitting on his wheel and his drops. We see on the right of the screen, Michael Matthews looking behind, checking if anybody else is going to come and take points. That is a real show of class. Class and respect, if you like, because although Edvald Boasson-Hagen would have wanted to try and take those points, etc., yeah, it's not going to make much of a difference. And at the same time, Edvald Boasson-Hagen now is fully committed to the actual winning of the stage. And I think rather than ruin the harmony of the move and make Peter Sagan angry, because nobody wants Peter Sagan angry, they just all let him go and take it. And yeah, it's the ultimate sign of respect.
Keep things smooth and ticking over nicely in this very, very powerful group of 15 riders who've got themselves 6.5 minutes advantage. Went up over 7 minutes at one point when Katusha decided to sit up because the chase was looking pointless, but then IM Cycling got back onto the front of the peloton. They picked it back a bit. 6.25 the advantage. Peter Sagan now on the road, the green jersey. He jumps above Mark Cavendish, leading him now by 13 points, if my maths is correct. And he's got the carrot of a further 50 points should he go on to win the stage. And almost by definition, if Peter Sagan were to win the stage, that would mean that the breakaway stays away all the way to the end and Mark Cavendish would come away empty-handed. So he could land a real blow in the green jersey competition today.
And that's how he's won it, really, in the last few years, Peter Sagan, is by moves like today, where as the race develops and it gets harder for the peloton to control these moves and there's more people that want to be in the breakaway, he manages to get himself in there, force it, not only get the intermediate points, but score points on the finish line, and the sprint on the same time the other sprinters aren't getting any.
Boasson-Hagen and Sagan just discussing the way that all panned out, and he was allowed the world champion uncontested passage through the intermediate sprint of the day at 74.5 kilometres to go. And the next finish line is 72.6k up the road as Sam Dumoulin moves to the front.
So the peloton has brought the time gap back a little bit. It's brought back 20 seconds, but this weather it's probably going to stall around there, because unless there's more riders going to the front to contribute, sometimes when the gap starts to come down, it offers a fresh motivation to other teams to contribute once they see that glimmer of hope that this might be brought back. But they'll have also seen that this is 15 riders and 15 very good riders up the road. So you have to, I think they're all fully aware that it's going to be very hard to bring this back, because they're not going to slow down, these 15. They'll start attacking at some point, and there's enough strength in there for it to carry its momentum all the way to the finish line.
They're heading due north now, and they will remain in that position all the way pretty much to the finish line in Revel. They come into the outskirts of the old medieval town, and then they head away again and up that final Category 3 climb, the Côte de Saint-Ferréol. And then there's a descent all the way to the finish. There's two physically similar athletes, Steve Cummings and Vincenzo Nibali. About the same height, about the same weight, about the same build. One having a more successful Tour de France than the other, and that's Steve Cummings with his stage win already locked away for posterity, and he's on the hunt for more today. And frankly, David, he's one of, you almost look at all 15, you could argue a case for almost any of them. Maybe not so much Mikel Landa and Damiano Caruso, and you'd imagine that Caruso, for example, will be put solely to the service of Greg van Avermaet, who is much more suited to the final today. And Mikel Landa, I don't think, would have the kind of punch that you need to live with those fast men on a short, sharp climb like that. But the likes of Tony Gallopin, Edouard Bosenhagen, Steve Cummings we've discussed, even Nibali himself, you can almost see any of them winning.
No, seriously, there's such a spectrum of talents in there, and different types of abilities as well, from pure sprinters to the classic style riders to breakaway. So it could unfold in numerous different ways, and like you said, a rider like Caruso will be there at the disposal of Greg van Avermaet to try and keep it together as much as possible. But at the same time, Greg van Avermaet, normally in a group you'd think he'd be the fastest guy there, but we've got 2 or 3 really fast sprinters in that group, so it's going to be a challenge for him. He might have to try and find an alternative tactic and try and break away on that final climb, which he'd then rely on Caruso to set that up for him. But yeah, it's going to make for a very tactical and interesting final part of the race. They'll work together very smoothly for the next 50-60 Ks, and then we'll see the cat and mouse begin, and we'll get an idea of who's going to use what tactics.
2010, the last time that the race came to Revel, and the winner on that occasion was Alexander Vinokourov, with Mark Cavendish in second place. You were in that race, David. At what point did Vinokourov make his big move on that occasion?
Just in the final part of that final climb, and it was one of those ones where it seemed a fairly done deal that it was going to be a bunch sprint. And he broke away, and we didn't find out. I got dropped earlier on. I was pretty tired at that point in the race and was taking it easy. And when I got to the finish line, we found out that Vinokourov had won, and it seemed remarkable because he'd been in the break the day before, and I see the peloton slightly Team Sky just moving off and leaving the 2 IM guys by themselves. Just to look, yeah, that's I don't know whether Ian's going across to tell them, do you want to move over to the left-hand side of the road? Yeah, that's exactly what he's doing. Come on, move over. So that's sometimes what you do, because it's like they're basically putting everyone in the wind by not being on the left-hand side. So Team Sky have just gone across to make sure they keep their full team protected from the mild crosswind. And now they've asked IM to come across to sit further to the left so that they can now move back in and form the echelon behind them.
It's interesting that the wind is having a slight effect on the road here, David, because this is the direction, and it's more or less exposed to the wind on for long stretches here. This is the direction they'll be heading in for the next, 50 kilometres pretty much.
No, but
so it's one to watch, isn't it?
It's not so strong, and I think with the race being in the situation it is, it would take such a massive acceleration of speed to cause damage. I mean, although they're like that at the front, you can see the rest of the peloton isn't strung out, so it's not very strong, and it's just for those riders at the front staying comfortable. But I think we'll see, but it would have to take a team really attacking it to cause any damage in the crosswind this week.
Well, it had looked a little bit doomed, that effort from the 2 riders from IM Cycling, but they're doing okay, and the advantage of the breakaway has come down now to 6 minutes and 11 seconds, so they've knocked off a minute. There's 68.4 kilometres still to go. We're going to take another break. Welcome back. We continue our journey through the Languedoc and looking down on this lush scenery in uncharacteristically cool conditions, it has to be said. That is the situation on the race. 64.1 kilometres remaining, and the advantage is being held now at just over 6 minutes. And I Am Cycling mean business here. They have sent pretty much their entire team. At least last time we caught a glimpse of it, 5 riders had taken part in this chase, and they are the only team working, but they are doing a decent job of it at the moment, even if it's not entirely clear to either David Miller or myself quite why or who they've got in mind for today's stage win. But that will all come clear as the rest of the race unfolds. In the meantime, while things are relatively quiet though, I'm delighted to say, been joined on the telephone, assuming it all works technically for us, by the Dimension Data Sports Director Sportif, Roger Hammond. Roger, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah, hello.
Excellent. Hello. Well, what a day. Well, what a tour you're having, first and foremost. But what an interesting day this could be for your team. You've got 2 of the very, very best up the road, and you've got the best sprinter in the world in the bunch, should you need a plan B as well. So it's worked out beautifully well for you at the moment.
Yeah, that's it. We always knew it was going to be difficult on that opening climb out of Andorra, going up to the highest point of the Tour de France. It was always difficult to control Sagan to defend the green jersey. So we shifted focus to trying to control the things we can do, and that was to put us 2 of our strongest breakaway riders in that breakaway. And then if it all comes back together, then Mark's there ready and waiting to pound. If it all does come back together for that final climb.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a little bit guarded publicly about what he feels about the final Category 3 climb, Mark Cavendish. He knows it, of course. He's raced it before in 2010, and he finished second there after that attack by Alexander Vinokurov. What do you think? Do you think it's a climb that Mark on his day can get over?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, especially in the Tour de France, definitely in the Tour de France, he becomes a different animal, and all of a sudden he can suddenly climb when he needs to. He's very calculated as a rider. He knows what he can achieve, can't achieve, and he looks at that Category 3, taking confidence in the fact the last time he went over it, he finished second on the stage. I don't think there was anyone catching him for that day. But, the tactics today have played into his hands a little bit more as well, in that this breakaway is very strong with all the riders that you really expect to hit out on that final climb already up the road. So they're using a lot of energy. So that's something they can't use on that final Category 3 climb. They'll come back together, and Mark's ready to go.
Hey Roger, it's David Miller.
Hi. Hello, Dave. Hi.
Just calling out, sorry, I was race radio in the background before I missed slightly, but I'm just wondering if you've got such a choice of tactics now. If this I Am random chase that none of us seem to understand at the moment, apart from the chance that it's the punishment chase, if it gets closer, if other teams start chasing, you could play the card, I suppose, of having Steve and Edvald just sitting on, but commit to the chase as well, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the thing. We've got, as you know, we've got riders where you're not obliged in any way to chase, which is good for us on season. Firstly today, it saves the riders who do have the fun working at all. And the other point is that we're saving ourselves a little bit for tomorrow as well. Tomorrow's another big fun sprint where the riders are going to have to do a lot of work.
Yeah.
So, it's saving us on two fronts, really.
Roger, as we can hear, you're in a car in the race, and we can hear race radio very loudly coming through into your car. I don't know, you...
Yeah, I've just been called up by the riders, actually, Ned. I've just been called up by the riders. Whenever you call me up, call me on the phone, I get called up to the peloton.
You've got a job to do. Listen, we really appreciate your time. We'll speak to you again soon, and good luck with the rest of the stage.
Thanks very much.
All right, cheers, Roger. Thanks.
Cheers, guys. Good luck. Bye-bye.
Very interesting to hear Roger Hammond's thoughts there, and what a day it could be for their team. But that looks a very different chase as well. Suddenly, I Am Cycling are not alone, and the signal that they sent to the rest of the peloton, as Jarlinson Pantano is the last rider in their train, has obviously had a ripple effect all the way down through the other teams who might have a vested interest in today. And as you can see, BMC are very close to the front. They have got 2 riders up the road, but Edix Quickstep, the blue team with Marcel Kittel, they don't have a rider up the road, and they are all over the left-hand side of the road now. So a number of teams just showing themselves more willing to share the work. Yeah, I mean, it's but at the same time, 60 Ks to go, 6 minutes. It's a big ask, and I think if I Am stand a chance of bringing this back, they need to
almost say to themselves, right, let's just go as hard as we can for 25, 30 Ks and try and get it down to 3 minutes or something, and then hope that another team, that will motivate another team to do it. Because if they just sit at this pace, chipping away at it, they're not going to bring it back, because this group is so strong, it will start to splinter and they'll start to attack each other again. But at the same time, like you said, Ethics Quick Step are moving up slightly. We can see that how the bunch is elongated, meaning that it is going fast. Everyone's having to sit on the wheels. They can't just sit around chatting. The average speed we see there is 43.4 kilometers an hour, which is pretty impressive considering they've gone over one of the highest road in the Pyrenees in the first 22 Ks. So it's another hard day, and like Roger was saying, this has worked out perfectly for Dimension Data, because instead of having to use their whole team chasing today, by having Steve Cummings and Edvald Boasson in that move, they're not expected to ride. So they're getting a bit of if it works out, it works out, but they can also play that tactic. If it gets closer, if it gets to 3 minutes, 2 minutes, they could play the clever game of putting one rider on the chase in the peloton or two riders at the front, and then order Steve Cummings and Edvald Boasson in that group to stop riding, and then they can just say, but we're chasing behind, we're now racing for Mark, and then that really sets it. That's when it starts to get really complicated and interesting.
That's a very interesting point. The normal algebra of a stage would suggest that you get 1 minute for each 10 kilometers, and we're precisely at that point pretty much. A 6-minute advantage, and we've just dipped under 60k to go. Orica Bike Exchange, they've got 3 riders up front. Matt Heyman is their rider, you can see on the left-hand side of the screen there. Really, it is only I Am Cycling who are actually doing the work, but they're doing a decent job of it at the moment. As we look down at the walled medieval city of Mirepoix, its geometric layout. If you look down on the at it from the air, it actually looks like a drafts board. Ruined in, get this, David, what a few years they had in the middle of the 14th century. It was ruined in 1355 by the cavalcade of the Black Prince, ravaged in 1361 by the plague, and then the next year it was pillaged and burned by the mercenary soldiers of Jean Petit.
You might want to consider moving house.
Bad few years to be living in Mirepoix. I've been there actually, it's a fantastic place. Tour de France visited there a few years ago, unless my memory serves me incorrectly, which it normally does. But yeah, you can see the half-timbered houses and the wooden cloisters.
It's quite a similar square to here in the centre of Revel as well. It's obviously the architectural style around here.
So Coppel leads the I Am Cycling chase through Mirepoix. Stubborn advantage remains, 6 minutes. They haven't managed to get it under that just yet. But Ethics Quick Step, well, they've got Fabio Zabattini and who else is working there? I think Petr Vakoc is contributing to the chase. No sign of Tony Martin, but there's the green jersey of Mark Cavendish. What's he up to now? Having a word with Ian Stannard, former teammate, of course, and a man he knows so well. What will they be discussing, do you think, David? The race situation or the weather?
No, or maybe just why I am riding. It's,
what they're doing.
Yeah, I think they're probably a little bit confused by that. But it's interesting, like seeing Ethics Quick Step move up, because the closer this gets, the more they'll be motivated to contribute, because there are so few sprint stages left in this race. 3, I think.
Tomorrow is a bunch sprint.
Tomorrow is a bunch sprint, normally. And so Paris, and that's about it. So it's worth going for it, really. I mean, but it is a big gamble, because we know there's that climb with 8Ks to go, set 9Ks to go, and that is again a bit of a big ask for Marcel Kittel. But at the same time, if he's got strong teammates around him and they slide back and they pace it well, they could perhaps get him back on and keep him up in that group.
What I was just wondering has just been answered, actually. I was just thinking, where on earth are Katusha, having done all that work twice to no effect, and then I Am waiting for allies, essentially, and then I Am Cycling do precisely what they were after? Why aren't Katusha moving up and contributing to this chase? I mean, otherwise, all of that work would have been in vain.
Yeah, it makes no sense, and it goes to show those orders came from the car rather than from on the road. That wasn't a road captain making that decision, because they'd then make the decision now to go back up and contribute. There's obviously a little bit of conflict going on between the car and the riders, because they obviously all ordered twice to do it before, and then now the cars got angry and given up on them, and no, there's no consistency there. it would be logical, you think, for them to just go and contribute to IAM.
Well, the riders, as you saw, all strewn down the peloton. Ilnur Zakarin not doing anything to help. Alberto Losada was another rider nowhere near the front, but they have sent 3 others forward, and next time we get a helicopter view, as I hope we're going to do just now, watch out for those red jerseys of Katusha and whether or not they're going to help IAM Cycling do the damage to this breakaway. Alexander Kristoff will be incredibly motivated to get his Tour de France up and running. And of the big bunch sprinters, Kristoff is probably best suited of all to get over this climb and execute a sprint finish. Former winner, of course, like Mark Cavendish of Milan-San Remo. Marcel Kittel is probably the least suited to the final climb. Nonetheless, on his day, he too can get over it. So all things are still possible. 55.9k remaining, and the advantage 6 minutes and 13 seconds. Is it going to be stage win number 2 for the world champion Peter Sagan? Well, possibly, but it's not a certainty that this breakaway group of 15 riders will stay away. 5 minutes and 46 seconds back down the road. The yellow jersey group has upped the ante a little bit more, with a number of teams now showing more interest. IAM Cycling have 5 or 6 men forward, but they are no longer alone in the chase. And the more this does come back, the more that belief will spread through this group, the yellow jersey group, that the catch is a real possibility and that there is something at stake after all for their main men. There's a familiar face at the front, setting the pace, bobbing around. We have seen glimpses of the tongue in action, and you couldn't rule out another showing before too long. Thomas Voeckler for Direct Energie, just pushing on this little uphill section into a headwind. It's tough riding here, and it'll remain so all the way up to Revel before they kick right-handed and head up the final climb. All that still to come, though. Got 40 kilometres to chase down this group. Direct Energie will be working for Brian Coquard, who is a very, very interesting rider if it does come back together again, because he is a man who goes uphill extremely well. Very slight build for a sprinter, so there's not much of him to get up that climb, and it would suit him. It would certainly suit him, this is precisely why the tongue is out and Voeckler's on the front. That said, they've got a man in the breakaway, David, Sylvain Chavanel, so you would expect him not to do any work now if he knows that his team is riding behind.
No, that would be silly if he was still working up there. Normally what would happen is the team cars, because the team car we spoke to, Roger Hammonds, he's car number 1. So the car number 1 always stays with their GC, their main guy. So for Dimension Data, that's Mark Cavendish, and that Roger Hammond will stay there behind the peloton, behind the front of what's left of the peloton at all times, or near Mark Cavendish. Car number 2, whenever it's a breakaway, will move up, and that's what's up there. See, when in the penultimate position there, he, in theory, will now not move from there, because car number 2 would have been told that because the team radios, the radio that Sylvain Chavanel has, doesn't go far enough back to the peloton to be told by the riders. They'll have had to radio ahead or phone call to car number 2 and say, okay, we're chasing now Sylvain Chavanel, tell him to stop riding. And then he can say, so then these riders come back and say, well, why aren't you riding? You've got to contribute. And you say, well, I'm not going to, because my team's now chasing. And then they won't ask you again. So it's a good tactic. And sometimes it's used as a bluff. You'll start chasing, do a soft tapping chase in order to allow your riders in the break to sit on. And but that's quite an advanced tactic that not many people really use.
Across into Département de l'Aude, famous for its Van de Pey. If you like your Corbière and your Minervois, and those big, thick, heavy red wines from the southwest of France, this is where they're grown. Rolling, undulating terrain. It's not flat around here.
So Thomas Voeckler has almost brought back a minute on his own. So he's just gone to the front and started smashing it, which is what you have to do. And this is what I said before IAM had to do. They have to go really hard now, and now they're contributing and helping Thomas Voeckler. He's lifted the pace, Voeckler, because IAM just had it stabilised there. They were just chipping away. But Voeckler's come to the front, and Voeckler knows how to race and what tactics to use. Even when because he's such a master of being on the break, he's also a master of chasing it down, because he knows that if he wants to get the race reignited, he has to get that. They have to get that break back, the time gap down as quickly as possible now.
Got a few big men on the front, including Reto Hollenstein, the Swiss rider, time trialist. from IM Cycling. He's a big engine. They've got a number. Martin Elmiger is another big rider. They've been fairly invisible, IM Cycling, as they often are, actually. The kind of riders they've got at their disposal, and not necessarily the showbiz riders, and they don't get many results at World Tour level, a team which is ending at the end of this year. As spectators just been ushered out of the way again, standing on the road when they've got all that verge to occupy. It does kind of defy belief sometimes, the risks that spectators take.
No, it has been a strange team, IM, since its creation. I think it was 4 years ago. It's came in with big ambitions and certainly fulfilled them by becoming a World Tour team, but never really signed the big riders. Well, they had Sylvain Chavanel, but he'd never really got the results that we'd grown accustomed to him achieving while at IM, and it seems that pretty much sums up IM. They really haven't achieved what you'd think what we expected them to do.
Well, they have that unique policy of giving every rider a one-year contract, which is motivating, or the opposite of motivating. Hard to say. I mean,
it hasn't worked.
No, it hasn't worked.
So, but yeah. So, and again, they've missed this, and they've been fairly invisible. So, hence the motivation for them. Well, motivation. They've been given the motivation by their director sportif to race on the front.
It's having an effect, with Vöckler helping them out for Direct Energie. 5 minutes and 8 seconds, 48.2 kilometres to go. It's still in the balance. These riders will be hoping it stays away. Now, what is Steve Cummings and Edvald Boasson-Hagen doing at the moment? Are they working at the front? You can see the Norwegian just stepping on his pedals further down the line. Cummings closer to the front. But at some point, when Mark Cavendish and his team further back down the road will start to believe this is going to come back together again, those two riders, like Chavanel is doing, might just sit on. There's no presence at the front from Dimension Data just yet, though.
So 5 minutes 7 seconds now. So it's, when we think at 60 kilometres, it was nearly, well, 6 minutes 15 seconds. They're not far off the 1 minute per 10k rule of thumb that we have in cycling for the hunting down of a breakaway. But that's all been, and here we go, it starts to split up. This had to happen because it was getting a bit too slow, a bit too. Everyone was looking at each other, starting to play games, and if they want this to work, they have to break it up. This is what we often see: a group this big, in order to get it to work, they need to get it a bit smaller and get a bit more vested interest in it.
And any prizes for guessing who's doing the breaking up at the front?
Probably Steve Cummings.
For Steve Cummings was certainly moving to the front, and he is in that front group. So too is the rainbow jersey. That's a pretty powerful combination if they want to get together, isn't it? Cummings and Sagan. Tony Galopin is at the front as well. Nibali, the last rider, at the back. And they slow down again. I've answered that attack with the counter-attack, got back on, and that's the problem now for the group of 15 riders. If they do start playing cat and mouse, you can see Sagan weaving across the road, looking from side to side, and that'll take all the concerted energy out of that group of 15 riders, and that will play into the hands a little bit of the chase if they continue to ride like that.
Yeah, this is the perfect situation for the peloton. If they hear they're starting to attack and play around up the front, and because that's going to cost some time. It's going to keep stalling that their rhythm in the front group, which you could see being lost already. And it's that won't have helped by having Sylvain Chavanel now sit on. That's now 2 riders at least who are sitting on, Michael Landa and Sylvain Chavanel, and that just sits in the back of the other riders' minds, knowing that they're giving a free ride to those two.
Orica Bike Exchange with 3 riders in this breakaway will continue to work all the way. This is their plan A. And they don't really have a plan B at the moment, so they will be very committed, and the gap comes under 5 minutes for the first time. And there are the riders who are sitting on. Vincenzo Nibali hasn't done much of the work at all. Chavanel can't, his team are chasing, and Mikel Landa, well, he's sitting on 2. 46.4k to go. Still they head north.
It's consistently coming down now, and there's probably one team here that's really has a vested interest to keep this out, and that is Orica Bike Exchange. So Luke Durbridge going to the front there, because they'll use Darrell Impey and Luke Durbridge as the engines to drive it forward in order to give Michael Matthews a real chance of competing in the sprint for the finish.
Well, you can see from that flag that it is a headwind. That normally favours the peloton, and maybe, just maybe, it's being tilted in favour of the catch. We're going to take another break.
It's a massive climb. It's one of the most iconic climbs this race has.
Everyone I spoke to said it's bloody hard. If I get there and there's no big break up the road and I'm feeling good, I can try something.
When I got to the top last time, I had to get onto oxygen support. I was so tired.
Last time we went up with 1-2, Quintana attacked. If that happens again, that's perfect for me.
Sería bonito ganar ahí. Alguna vez hice segundo, esta vez quisiera ganar.
To win up there again would just be unreal, be out of this world.
The small matter of the Giant of Provence, the highlight of the middle week of this edition of the Tour de France. Back on the Tour de France, Mont Ventoux, live on ITV4 on Thursday at 2 p.m. Fascinating race in prospect on Thursday and a fascinating race developing on the run into Revel. 41.5k to go, 4:46 the advantage for the 15, but the 15 are attacking each other. And the pattern continues. This time Sagan and Cummings are caught out somewhat, and they are part of a group of risers just closing the gap and getting back on. So I'm not entirely sure who's done the attacking at the front on this particular occasion. It looks like Sam Dumoulin was involved from AG2 Isle Mondial and Rui Costa, as well, of course, as a trio of riders, as Luke Durbridge goes to the front from Orica Bike Exchange, Daryl Impey and Michael Matthews, for whom this is a absolutely perfect looking final 10 kilometres or so. He's been quite a, sorry, Dave, he's been quite a revelation, Michael Matthews, this year, wearing the leader's jersey on Paris-Nice, and at one point actually thinking, I can maybe have a go at winning this overall. It didn't work out for him in the end, but he does consider himself, and everyone knows that he can climb extremely well as well.
Yeah, he is. He's like we talked about the other day regards him, he's a bit like a younger version, a smaller version of Peter Sagan, and he's got very similar attributes to him. He can sprint, he can climb, a bit of an all-rounder. And we've seen he was under 23 world champion in a small sprint in Australia, and that really kind of set the tone for his career. He's that style of rider. He was up there in the Worlds last year. It's a race that one year, no doubt, he will win. The Ardennes Classics, Amstel, and those 1 week long stage races like Paris-Nice where he can pick up stages. He's a fantastic rider, and he really is one of those guys who he likes the smaller bunch sprints for about 50, 60. He can excel.
Well, this chase is stalling a little at this point, and that's because only one man is chasing. It's still Thomas Voeckler from Direct Energie. He's been doing all the work over the last 10 or 15 kilometres, and really, someone needs to come and help him.
Well, he's got two right. There are two of the IAM cycling riding with him. But that's only three riders, and Thomas Voeckler is doing the majority of it. And if they want to continue the time tumbling down, which is Thomas Voeckler who has forced it because it had stabilised, the IM chase had stabilised it, but then it's been since then it's been Thomas Voeckler that really has given it that injection of pace. Whereas up here you can see it, but we've seen it before, it's been split apart. I'm not even so sure if it's been attacked, but more sometimes they just split apart. Somebody doesn't want to fall, like Sylvain Chavannes in the middle, he doesn't want to ride through, so sometimes a gap can just open up because the guy behind him, or it's like you're not riding, I'm not riding, and before you know it, there's a 50-metre gap and they're having to chase it and close it back up again.
Just keep an eye on Cummings and Bosenhagen now, because they are sitting last and second to last behind the wheel of Sylvain Chavannes, and I wonder if they've now been instructed to sit on and not work. Up to this point they have been contributing, but perhaps Mark Cavendish and his team have said, well, this is going to come back, stop forcing pace in the breakaway. I wonder. Just watch them. See what they do. Rui Costa moves to the front, along with Mikel Landa and the trio of Orica Bike Exchange riders.
And you can see Daryl Impey for Orica Bike Exchange at the front really forcing this. It's in their interest to keep this away, because they don't have many options behind. They have their main sprinter, if you like, Michael Matthews up here in this move. So they do have a plan B in Simon Gerrans, but I think that. And actually, Daryl Impey would have been as well a perfect rider for today's stage, but he's obviously been put to work for Michael Matthews, which often happens to Daryl Impey. Although he's an excellent rider in his own right, he is often put to lead out duty for those guys, or like today to be the driving force in this breakaway to make sure it stays away. And Luke Durbridge, who's a fantastic time trialist and a powerhouse as well. So in a way, Michael Matthews has two dream teammates there.
Reducing the pace on the descent. Wet roads now, dangerous conditions. The wind gusting and blowing these treetops. Sheltered bit of road here in the wood as they head down, and fairly soon they'll be lining up again and heading for the town of Castelnaudry. Crossing over the Canal du Midi, which joins the Atlantic to the Mediterranean, heading from Bordeaux diagonally across southwest France. And then it's straight to Revel, pretty much in a northerly direction. 4:38 the advantage, 38.2k to go, so it's just not coming back at the moment with any particular speed.
No, and Direct Energy really should put 2 or 3 more riders up there and just get this done and try and get it down to under 2 minutes, and then hopefully force other teams to come up, or give them a reason to. Because at the moment, they've only got 2 riders riding with Thomas Vauclair, and so instead of just letting Tom Vauclair do it, they should put another 2 up there and try and get it down to 3 minutes, because there's only got 37 kilometres left, and 4 minutes 40, it's a big ask. I mean, but you can see how fast they're going. It is strung out completely, but they need to go faster.
It's a game of bluff to some extent. If there's the belief that this will naturally come back, then some of the teams, for example, Cofidis or Giant Alpecin, will be thinking, why put our riders into the red now when we might need them later? So hoping that other teams will do the early damage and burn themselves out, and you can then come over the top and take advantage. But if that ploy doesn't work, then the whole day has been in vain. So at some point the calculation has to be made. Right now we have to help. Is that point being reached now as the gap goes out again and the kilometres tick down? Delicate stage in this race in the pouring rain on the road to Revel. Rattling through Languedoc, dropping out of the Pyrenees, the chase is on. 15 of the very best riders in the Tour de France are up the road, and at this point, with just over 30 kilometres of racing remaining, it is advantage breakaway. What a group it is. 6 former yellow jersey wearers, 9 former stage winners of the Tour de France, and 1 former winner outright in Vincenzo Nibali. They have a 4 minutes and 40-second advantage over a disorganised and slightly ineffectual chase. 2 teams riding at the front. Direct Energy trying to set things up for Brian Coquard. His team leader Thomas Vauclair doing most of the work for him so far to this point. And I Am Cycling, who frankly no one really knows why they're riding, but they certainly have been very committed to bringing this back. However, has it stalled? Is that advantage now to those 15 too much for anyone to bring back on their own, or even a combination of the best teams to bring back 4:39? That's a significant chunk of time. Sylvain Chavanel, he's up the road, but he'll just be sitting on because his team are working at the front, trying to set things up for Brian Coquard. Too late, David?
I think so, yeah. 31 kilometres to go. That is mainly flat apart from a 2 kilometre climb with 8k's, 9k's to go. So there's not going to be much difference in speed between the peloton and this group. I mean, it's a big group and it's working well together. Vincenzo Nibali's not doing much work, just playing a quiet game. So I think his only chance of winning today is getting away solo, because you look at the quality of sprinters in this group and how many of them want to kind of get the group together. It's going to be very hard for him to match them, so it's in his interest to save his energy a bit and try and do one big attack in the final. But you can see it's working well, and we see now that Direct Energy have finally put 2 more riders to help Tom Vauclair, because he was up there contributing with 2 IAM, and that just wasn't enough. He brought back a minute and a bit on his own, but you can see this time is coming down a bit again, but they're going to have to chase so hard. 30 kilometres racing, it's only 40 minutes, maybe less of racing left today, and so to bring back 4.5 minutes on a group this big in that space in that short time is difficult.
Well, this big and this good. That's the other issue, isn't it? It's almost self-defining at this point in the Tour de France. The riders who get away on a difficult stage like this, dropping out of the Pyrenees, are the best in the world, self-selectingly.
Yeah, they are. I mean, there was a 20+ kilometre climb to start the day, and they raced up it furiously. Peter Sagan being the main force in that, continuously attacking. Even I think he got to the point doing the old attacking himself. So it's counter-attacking himself, which only Peter Sagan would do. But he did end up dragging it all the way, and what he's dragged away are the strongest non-GC riders, because obviously the only guys who could have stuck with them would have been the GC guys, but they're not going to do that because this is one of their semi-recovery days, if you like, in between their next big rendezvous, which is Mont Ventoux in 2 days. And so these 15 riders, and we see what their palmares is between them is pretty remarkable.
For those of you wondering where the devil is, he's in the detail. And the detail at this point happens to be a caravan parked up at the side of the road on the outskirts of Castelnaudry, the town that they are heading through now. Plane trees either side of the road, tricklers out. That's a classic Tour de France scene, and you've got some of the best riders of recent editions of the race represented up the road. You could argue a case for almost any of these riders winning today. You could see almost any of them doing just that. Sam Dumoulin, Étoile Mondiale, he's won a stage of the Tour de France a good few years ago, admittedly in 2008. Edvard Boasson-Hagen, a couple of stages to his name, his palmares. Looking down on the bunch, Mark Cavendish in the green skin suit today. Well, he's a very, very convincing plan B for Dimension Data if this gets pulled back. Having said that, there's a 3-kilometre climb on the outskirts of Revel, David, that you know all about, having raced it right the way back 16 years ago. Hate to remind you of that, but in the year 2000 you finished 4th on that occasion. You rode it as well this morning, doing a bit of reconnaissance, and it's a proper climb, isn't it? Given Category 3 status, given where it is in the race, it's going to be a major obstacle, and not all of those sprinters would expect to get over that climb.
No, it's a perfect climb. It's a sort of climb I liked at the end of the race. It all serves as a launch pad. It's not very steep, but it's steep enough to be able to cause damage and drop the non-climbers. And because of where it comes in the race, this has been a hard day, and we're fairly deep into the Tour de France, and it's the first, as you call it, transition stages. It's the first stage after the Pyrenees, and it's where all those riders really do want to get in that break, and they've done it, but they're going to be a bit tired, and they can make a difference on that climb. If you put that climb in another race, in a one-day race, it probably wouldn't cause so much damage, but because of the level of fatigue and how hard they've been racing today and the days before, it does have a big effect. And we can see now just how concerted this chase. This is what they had to be doing from about 10 Ks ago. Now they're starting to understand if there's any chance of getting this back, they have to put more guys up there, and they need to always go as hard as they can.
Yeah, they're holding nothing back now, because if they do sit up, then all that effort is for nothing. All the work that they've put in so far would be in vain. So give it another 10 kilometres, see what the race situation is there. Edging down towards 4 minutes, but the kilometres are just ticking away, and they need to take a serious chunk of time now. Shave off a minute in quick order for this to really be given any degree of belief, I think, amongst the other teams that they can catch this group of 15 riders, and then they can expect a bit more help, Direct Energy and IM Cycling. There was a glimpse of Trek Segafredo, who also don't have a rider in the breakaway, and do have a man who can mix it in the bunch sprints in Edwin Toons in their midst, and I wonder if they're thinking about him.
Yeah, well, like we said before, Jasper Stuyven, who's good at these sort of sprints. If it's going this fast now, even the peloton is going to rip to pieces somewhat when they hit that climb if they continue this rate to the bottom of it. But they have to be trying to aim to get a minute off in the next 7 or 8 Ks to get it closer to 3 minutes by the 20K mark to stand any chance. Hence why they're having to go so deep in that chase right now. Because the problem is when that group 15, it's not like a group of 4 or 5 riders that's been away all day and is fatigued. They've been able to share the workload enough amongst those 15 riders to still be relatively fresh and be able to make a difference when they attack.
So the peloton snaking through the town of Castelnaudry, and fairly soon they'll be crossing the Canal du Midi as well. The wonderful waterways, characteristic of the Languedoc, that bisect this part of the world, going from the Atlantic down to the Mediterranean. There it is. Le Grand Bassin, part of the Canal du Midi waterway system, dug out a couple of 100 years ago. So fantastic scene, and the peloton cross over the Canal du Midi, and they are heading northwards now into a cross headwind all the way as Vöckler gets back on the front and the tongue comes out again. Close to 4 minutes, 26.4 kilometres remaining. Still in the balance, but it's advantage breakaway. The wind is blowing across this long straight section of road heading north from Castelnaudry to Revel, and it is having an effect. You can see indications of it at the back of the peloton as well, as little groups get separated from the yellow jersey group. Echelons forming all over the road at the moment, at the back and the front of the race. The breakaway too, next time we see it, has disintegrated, and only 8 riders remain of that original 15. Team Sky shepherd Chris Froome to the front to try and keep him in precisely the right place should this develop into a fraught situation. Not just in terms of the stage win, but you don't want to lose time on a stage like this. And how often have we seen that on the Tour de France? It does happen, it can happen, and you need to be tremendously alert now. So suddenly this has become a GC race as well.
Yeah, Direct Energy is because they've stopped chasing now, but because it's been going so fast for so long, when they've hit this section that wouldn't have done so much damage normally, it's put everybody under stress, because we saw the pictures before where the peloton was elongated and just stretched out in one long line, and that's always when this is going to happen. The front part of the peloton, the front 80 by the looks of it, 60, 80 are pretty safe because they're grouped together like this and they get protection from the wind, but that long strung out section, it just got broken up completely.
Spartacus moves to the front, Fabian Cancellara for Trek Segafredo. And none of these teams are actually chasing at the moment, they're just looking after their main men for the general classification. And IM Cycling and Direct Energy, who've done so much hard work to bring it to 3:47, have disappeared from the front of the bike race at the moment, at least the yellow jersey group. So you'd expect that advantage for the breakaway now to go out unless someone takes it on again. It's not going to be BMC. They've got Greg van Avermaet handily placed in the 8 riders at the front of the race. These two, Mikel Landa and Vincenzo Nibali, are just joining 5 riders who missed that split. When Peter Sagan accelerated, it opened a big hole in the breakaway group of 15. The 3 riders, Durbridge and Impey,
Michael
Matthews for Orica Bike Exchange, they reacted as one, pretty much, those 3, and got right on the wheel of the world champion Peter Sagan. They have made this selection. They're the right side of the split that emerged on the road.
Yeah, and that was a very smart move by Peter Sagan, and it's a classic Peter Sagan move in that he didn't really attack. He just went to the front, could read the wind was coming slightly from the left, put it in the gutter and just accelerated and caught people out, so it caused a little splits that I don't think any of them really expected that, so which is quite surprising considering it's been in the same direction for a long time. But I suppose they didn't really think that Peter Sagan would be hitting this far out.
Well, of those teams represented at the front of the yellow jersey group, the main peloton, only Trek Segafredo don't have a man in the breakaway, but they're not chasing. They're simply looking after Bauke Mollema. He was 3rd wheel of that little train headed by Fabian Cancellara. So they're not working. Movistar aren't working, they've got a rider in the breakaway. Team Sky, they've got Mikel Landa out front, and anyway, they're not too interested in a stage win today. They've got bigger fish to fry. AG2R La Mondiale have Sam Dumoulin sitting pretty up the road. There he is at the back of that group. That's the selection at the very front of the race. Peter Sagan, Michael Matthews, Daryl Impey, Luke Durbridge, Edvard Bosenhagen from Dimension Data, Greg van Avermaet and Sam Dumoulin. So they've got some real talent in this group, and with 4 minutes and 9 seconds advantage and just over 20 kilometres to run, it looks like the winner is going to come from this group of 8.
This is a fantastic situation for Orica Bike Exchange right now, although you say that it also means it puts them under a lot of pressure because they're going to have to play this perfectly because they make up almost very nearly 50% of this breakaway. So the rest of the riders will know that they're going to have that pressure, and it's up to them to keep this away, and also they know they're going to set up Michael Matthews. And you can see that, you can see how hard Luke Durbridge and Daryl Impey, who's on the front now, are working. They really are the driving force now, making sure this stays away. And now the riders that have been split apart from that Sagan acceleration, as Nibali goes again, but it's just not going to work. They're not going to make it up to a group that strong now, I don't think, and certainly not on your own. It's just a little bit. Steve Cummings obviously is a little bit fatigued. Mikel Landa couldn't hold the wheel of Peter Sagan, so we know he's not strong enough to go across.
Well, 2 of those riders in this group have a rider represented in the front group, so neither Damiano Caruso nor Steve Cummings should work or do anything to bring those other riders across to this group and muddy the water for their their men up the road. That's Greg van Avermaet and Edvald Boasson-Hagen, respectively, for BMC and Dimension Data. Through 20 kilometres, the world champion sitting on a trio of Orica Bike Exchange wheels. Luke Durbridge doing the grunt work, the hard work. It's all about Michael Matthews, you would expect for them, but in Darrell Impey they have a very, very willing and able man, should that not work out today for Michael Matthews. Gap goes out all the time, the heat is fully out of the chase now. There's a group caught in no man's land, and their advantage is almost a minute over a group headed by Vincenzo Nibali.
This is the rear of the peloton, still the riders still getting back on again now. So it looks at so that's from
the wrong side of that split. So
it'll all start coming back together again now, because you can see the peloton after that initial the speed that Direct Energy carried into the crosswind split it apart, but now it's all coming back together again. And I'd imagine almost everybody that's been dropped in that crosswind section will make it back on. As you can see, the speed is now, the impetus is now gone from the peloton as they realise it's futile to chase, because they're not going to catch the move, especially now as it's split up ahead into 7 riders, seven of the strongest riders in the race, who all are capable of winning today. So that move is going to work.
And that's not the body language of a man who is expecting to contest a bunch sprint today. Andre Greipel, surrounded by his teammates, on a flat, more conventional stage, you'd see Lotto Soudal all the way over and up at the front of the peloton, as they have done so many times, making a big statement for the German sprinter, but it's not the case today. They're letting it go. 4:50 the advantage, nearly 5 minutes then from this group of 8 riders to the main peloton, with another group going nowhere, the second group on the road. And again, this is just riders, including Rafa Majka, who had a rear wheel puncture a little while ago, getting back on end of the peloton.
Not that it would be much concern for him. He's not racing GC. I think he's now, his main objective is to chase that mountains classification, the polka dot jersey, and we've seen him throughout the race be quite relaxed about the whole general classification.
Yeah.
And so I think then he looks at. I think the reason that he's just sitting at the back and doing that is he's resting, because the riders that have to chase that mountains classification every single mountains day is a massive day out, because they have to be going from kilometre 0.
Sagan doing a ridiculous amount of work on the front. I wonder how many times, if you add it up, he's been on the attack today. He attacked virtually from the flag dropping on the huge climb out of Andorra today. Over 2,400 metres before they dropped out of the Pyrenees and into the Languedoc region. And he's attacked this group as well, about 3 or 4 times. When I say this group, this is actually the second group on the road that you're looking at. It contains Steve Cummings, Tony Galopin, Rui Costa, etc. Yeah, Sagan is he's on one today, isn't he? And in this kind of form, with this kind of confidence, surely you'd make him favourite on the stage today. The question is, how much work has he done to this point at the front of the race, and will he be made to pay for that?
He's done a massive amount from right at the beginning of the race. He was the one always at the sharp end, forcing it, pushing, attacking, and then accelerating, and then driving it forward. You can see now he didn't wait for the guys to go through. He's just jumped into the line and making it, as Edvald Boasson-Hagen speaks to Michael Matthews and asks him why he's not riding. It's which is he's just starting to play the tactics a bit. Michael Matthews, he's got 2 teammates, he's going to count on them to do the work. But on the other hand, Peter Sagan, and this is often unfortunately what happens to Peter Sagan, he gets so carried away and he does so much because he feels so good that he ends up wasting the energy that he needs to play out for the win, whereas a rider like Michael Matthews is playing a little bit of a smart game, and that's because they're all scared of Peter Sagan as well. They want to do the minimum they can in order to stand a chance of beating him at the end of the race. But if we look at this group, I mean, it's very hard to pick who could win this. They're all very similar, with Greg van Avermaet, Peter Sagan, Michael Matthews. Sam Dumoulin is a great sprinter as well from a small group, and Edvald Boasson-Hagen on the back of the Norwegian jersey. I couldn't pick which one of those would win from this group at the moment.
Doesn't look like Boasson-Hagen wants to work. Matthews just had a little look and asked him a question, and there was a shake of the head from the Norwegian.
Well, that's because Michael Matthews isn't working, so I think he's just saying, well, if you're not going to work, I'm not going to work. In the meantime, Peter Sagan's just up there going through and off.
Well, someone does need to work, though, in that group, because their second group on the road hasn't given up, the one containing Cummings as an insurance policy for Dimension Data, and Vincenzo Nibali, etc. Rui Costa, who never gives up, really, does he? Saw him up the road and engaged in a big battle in Andorra Arcalis And here he is doing it on the flatlands. He's so versatile, Rui Costa, and perennially aggressive.
And as Michael Matthews and Edvald Boasson-Hagen still just sit on the back, so it's quite an interesting move. And I think Michael Matthews is basically saying, look, I'm not going to ride, my teammates are going to ride for me. So we could probably get to the point where no one will ride with the Orica Bike Exchange riders, because they're going to say, look, if you guys want to do it, you do it then. We're not going to just let Michael Matthews sit on the back and be fresh for the sprint and beat us all.
Yeah.
So we'll probably just find now that these two riders in the front, Daryl Impey, do everything.
Yeah. It's both the blessing and the curse of having strength in numbers from one team in a small group up the road like that. Everything is then expected of you.
Exactly.
It's over to you. 6 minutes, the advantage to the yellow jersey group, so you can eliminate them from the equation. Looks like the crosswinds have stopped buffeting that part of the race as well, so it'll be a gentle run-in for the rest.
Yeah, and for sure, Michael Matthews is definitely not riding, so Edvald Boasson-Hagen is just matching him as well, as that the Orica Bike Exchange is just slipping in front of him each time. So I'm quite surprised that Van Avermaet, Peter Sagan and Dumoulin are still riding, as Van Avermaet pulls over. So yeah, he's not going to ride either. So we're getting into that situation where it's the games have already begun.
Especially amongst the big four. Van Avermaet, Sagan, Boasson-Hagen and Matthews. Probably they're the favourites. Sam Dumoulin will be riding friendless for himself. The AG2R Mondial rider. He won from a breakaway into Nantes on the 2008 edition of the Tour de France, getting the better of a four-man move, but it was nothing like the calibre of riders that he's got to try and beat today. And still Sagan moves towards the front. Still he does work on the front. It's almost like he can't help himself, or he just knows he's good enough to do that and then produce the kind of power that is needed to break the rest.
We have seen him often do that, but we've also seen him often do that and finish second, get caught out and have a rider jump away from him, because he is, without fail, with or without the World Champions jersey, he's always the marksman. Now, obviously, when you're World Champion, it makes your life twice as hard, because that is the jersey that everybody marks out more often than not. But Peter Sagan's got such a reputation now that when he's in a move, he is the man to beat, and he knows that. And I think he is so strong that he's not going to play games. He just gets it done and doesn't let it work him up. You see that he just doesn't even hesitate.
At nearly 50 kilometres an hour into a cross headwind. Very, very flat this run into Revel. They go into the outskirts of town and then they hit a junction and go right-handed, and the road starts to rise gently at first in front of them and then into a proper climb. Category 3 climb. They start the official climb at 8.8 kilometres. It's the Côte de Saint-Ferréol, named after the little hamlet at the top of the climb on the outskirts of Revel. It's an average gradient of 6.6 kilometres, but when they get to the top of the King of the Mountains point, where they've placed the summit, if you like, that's not the end of the climbing. For probably another kilometre, maybe more, the road continues to rise up gently. So we look at the French national champion, Arthur Vichot from FDJ. Haven't seen too much of him so far in the race. And for anybody familiar with the south of England and riding their bike in Surrey, you could liken it in a weird way to Box Hill, this climb. It's a similar length, a similar gradient, and it's got a similar false flat at the top. That iconic, I think it's probably safe to say, climb that was used in the 2012 Olympic road race.
Yeah, it is very similar to that, so they're on a much bigger road, and probably just a little bit harder than Box Hill, because Box Hill it basically levels out a bit before it hits that plateau. The gradient eases in the last 500 meters, whereas this pretty much stays a constant gradient for the 2 kilometers, even getting a little bit steeper at one point towards the top. So it is perfect. It's going to make quite a tactical climb up there, but although saying that, all the riders that are in that move now, the lead 7 riders, they're all very similar in style, and they'll all believe they can win the sprint.
Well, we look down at the terracotta roof tiles of the Château de la Pomerade, which is on the top of the Black Mountains, a little ridge of mountains that run east to west, and over which the race has just passed as they head on flatter roads into Revel. 11.5 kilometres remaining. Vincenzo Nibali's group is almost 2 minutes further down the road now, so you can pretty much rule them out as well. This is your final selection of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Pick your favourite, pick your winner. I wouldn't want to put any money on any of these, because you can argue too strong a case for at least 4 of them. given what we know about their form on this race, I mean, Sagan looks like he's on some of the best form of his life. We haven't seen what Matthews can do just yet. We do know that Edvald Boasson-Hagen is looking strong this year, rejuvenated actually, almost back to his best as well.
Yeah, and they're riding a high dimension data. Success breeds success, and that's really showing with how they're racing at the moment. They seem to be inspired. So it's it'll be interesting to see what he does. But it has to be said, at the moment, Orica Bike Exchange really are in the driving seat. But we're yet to see. It's highly likely that already halfway up this climb, Luke Durbridge and Darrell Impey will be gone because the amount of work they've been doing trying to set it up for Michael Matthews. In which case we're going to have 5 riders really equally matched, and it's going to be interesting to see which one of those, because you'd imagine all of them will think they stand a chance of winning the sprint, even against Peter Sagan, because they're all so similar. But it's whether one of them is going to try and get away on the climb. But I'd probably normally think whoever goes first is likely to be the first loser, because Peter Sagan's not going to let anybody go and is fully capable of countering attack anything that goes. So by the way he's riding, he's riding with supreme confidence.
That's a bit of a day off for the yellow jersey group. They can just roll into Revel now. It really doesn't matter. Dan McClay caught a glimpse of him there from Fortuner Vital Concept. Through 10 kilometres they go. The rainbow jersey sitting on the wheel of Luke Durbridge. Orica Bike Exchange have played a blinder up to this point, getting 3 men in a 15-man move. And now when the selection was forced, mainly by Peter Sagan, it has to be said, all 3 of their riders reacted with brains and with the form as they head right-handed and onto the climb. And they are part of the final 7 men who are going to contest this stage into Revel. Under 10 kilometres to go, and they are climbing ever so gently now at first, but pretty soon when they turn left-handed up a long, steep ramp. This is the final climb of the day. Only 2 climbs. One was enormous. This is less enormous, but where it is in the race, 1.8 kilometres of climbing. When they go over the top, they'll have just 7 more to run. Makes it brutally hard and potentially decisive for today's stage. What's going to happen? Who's going to make their jump? You wouldn't want to go too early. Even when you get to the top of this climb, it's not over. The road continues to drag up to about, what, 5.5k before the descent in earnest begins.
Well, it's been interesting to see Luke Durbridge, who's on the front, who we've seen on the front the last couple of kilometres. So really, he's really trying to keep it together, and we'll try to keep it a steady pace for as long as possible. But just don't know how long he can go for, because it's been such a hard day, and he has done so much work. And the moment he pulls off, it will stall slightly. Darrell Impey's moved slightly further back down the line, and in a dream scenario, Michael Matthews would manage, this group would stay together over the top of this, so he could have 2 teammates to cover attacks and lead him out in the final. But it's probably in the interest of one of this group to attack, to at least blow out Durbridge and Darrell Impey, who in theory are totally there to help and set up Michael Matthews, and that makes everyone else's life quite difficult, so they may as well try and attack and break it up a bit.
A left-handed turn onto a really straight, absolutely constant gradient now for 500 or 600 metres, almost as if it had been designed with a spirit level. This part of the road, they are rising at about 6.5% gradient, and they're setting a furious pace. Luke Durbridge has done a huge amount of the early work for Orica Bike Exchange, and it's not enough for Peter Sagan. He's looking around, he wants the pace to be slightly higher. He's exposed himself right at the front. Peter Sagan, is he about to jump? He's twitching.
He's making it look so easy at the moment. And he's just drifting around, checking out who's there and seeing how everybody's body language is, and at the moment it looks like everybody's quite happy for it to remain like this and for them to push over and fight it out in the sprint, and that's perfect for Michael Matthews, because there's a strong chance that would mean, if they don't attack, that Luke Durbridge will be able to set this rhythm. So at the moment he's just going to do what he can to last as long as he can and pace it that way, and he's probably just waiting for an attack to happen, at which point his work will be done, because I don't think he'll be able to react to it in the slightest.
Every single one of the big 4 favourites in this group of 7 can climb. Michael Matthews, we know that. Darrell Impey, don't rule him out. How well did he climb the other day on the Tour? Greg van Avermaet, well, we know all about him now after his stint in the yellow jersey and how well he goes uphill. Edvald Boasson-Hagen, on his day, can live with some of the best climbers in the world, and Sagan could just about do everything on a bike.
As he accelerates sitting down, so there you go. That's what he had to do. He had to lose Durbridge first attack, and he's gone. But you can just see he's been doing this in kilometre zero today, Peter Sagan. It's just attack after attack, and he's attacking from the front, sitting down. But that's one drag. Now he's lost one of the Orica Bike Exchange, and Daryl Impey now goes.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's probably the best thing in the world for Michael Matthews, who all he has to do now, I say all he has to do, but he has to just sit on Sagan's wheel because his teammate is forcing Dumoulin and Sagan to react, and that's perfect for Michael Matthews at the moment, and he's on the world champion's wheel. Boasson-Hagen reacts to him, Greg van Avermaet are all there. So one by one, riders are beginning to sacrifice themselves and drop off. That's the advantage that Orica Bike Exchange have. That isn't a race-winning move, I don't think, from Daryl Impey, but it might be for his teammate.
Sagan's going again, just countering, sitting down, so he's just keeping the pace high and trying to whittle it down, as Dumoulin looks like he's struggling now.
Yeah, well, he just drops to the back, doesn't he, the man from Eji to Ala Mondial. He's having to sprint to get onto the wheel of Greg van Avermaet. Is he going to be the next rider to drop off and out of contention? Now Michael Matthews goes on the left-hand side of the road. Sagan will, or is that Daryl Impey? Impey again. So once again, that ploy, and Michael Matthews once again does what he needs to do and just glues himself to the world champion's wheel.
And it's great race. Oh, he finally has to get out the saddle, Peter Sagan. And that's the hardest section, if you like, to climb, where it doesn't now stop. It keeps going up steadily and then plateaus off before they descend. So it is tough. And if somebody goes right to the top of the plateau, that would be the prime spot to go.
The pace just comes down a bit as Peter Sagan peels away to the right, has a good look at everybody. Boasson-Hagen is giving nothing away. Van Avermaet has looked a little laboured on occasions at this point, but you never know with him. He can explode out of the pack, but Sagan just has everyone in his sights at the moment, leading from the front but keeping everyone in check. Impey, well, this is a huge effort from him. He's still in that group though, and he just jumps on the wheel of his teammate now. Matthews has clearly identified this one tactic at this point in the race of just sticking with Sagan at every moment. Big crowds at the top of this climb, and the road continues to rise. And the world champion continues to lead from the front. And
this was the moment to go. If you had the legs, which I doubt after all this attacking and what the day's been like, would be go now, because they've got about 300, 400, 500 metres, then they descend. It still falls flat, but slightly flattens out a bit more, but there's no clear descent at first. And you see Peter Sagan's just controlling this completely. This is the sort of behaviour you'd expect in the last kilometre, not with just under 7 kilometres to go. He's already riding as if he's just ruling the race.
The question is this going to work for Peter Sagan? Is this brilliant? Is this panache, or is it a little naive? Sometimes he shows both of those qualities in one race, and it doesn't always work out for him, and sometimes that's the difference between first and second place for him.
Well, I don't think he knows the meaning of the word bluff. He just takes control completely, and every single rider in this break, they know the man to beat is Peter Sagan, and he's showing that, and he's not scared of hiding that. And he accelerates again just to make sure nobody does attack and catch him out. But this is the sort of Eddie Merckx style racing, where he just sit at the front, look, he just keeps an eye on everybody, make sure that no one jumps him, and he just keeps winding it up.
That is a big acceleration from Sagan. Look at those legs now. They are absolutely thrashing the pedals. That's going to hurt everybody. And 1, 2, 3, 4 of the best get onto his wheel again. Sam Dumoulin still in contact, and so too is Daryl Impey. And now they turn downhill, and the next couple of kilometres they snake downhill on wet roads, very tight little corners, and Sagan heads the race downhill before it flattens out again for a long straight run into the finish line.
And it's impressive, but you do have to ask yourself what he's doing. He didn't need to do that big acceleration. He doesn't need to be marking everything at the moment. Michael Matthews is just sitting on him. Michael Matthews has barely done any work the last 20Ks, 25Ks. He's been playing a very clever game, sitting there, doing the minimum, which is always what you're taught to do as a young bike rider. Once you're in the break, try and do the minimum possible to save as much energy. Now, I think nobody taught Peter Sagan that. He does more than anybody else. For sure, because he's physically capable of that, and that's the way he likes to race. But if he doesn't win this today, then everyone's going to say, what were you doing? It was, you could use that word a bit naive, but it seems shameful to use that when you talk about a world champion. But look, he's attacking the descent now, and it's...
Well, he can, can't he? That's the point. He can, and it's exuding self-belief. Now, whether or not it works, it's great to watch as Edvard Boasson-Hagen tries to counter and goes off the top. He's picked his moment. 5 kilometres to go. The Norwegian gets on the front now, and that's possibly better news for Peter Sagan. Can he join Edvard Boasson-Hagen? A little gap opens up. Matthews remains where Matthews is. Greg Van Avermaet now moves up to take the wheel of the Australian, and still Dumoulin and Impey are there too, but Boassenhagen decided to attack on the descent, going over the top of Peter Sagan.
And this is the perfect situation for Michael Matthews, because he's just decided to glue himself to Peter Sagan's wheel. He can see what Peter Sagan's tactic is, which is just he's going to race from the front. That's what he's going to do. He's not going to play many games. But he's got Daryl Impey there in 6th place, in fact, the last mile in the road. Now, if he attacks, once they come off this and he does one big move, Michael Matthews doesn't have to chase. Well, he knows that Peter Sagan's going to jump after him, and they need to tire Peter Sagan out as much as possible, which means that Daryl Impey, I'd expect, rather than sit there and wait to lead out Michael Matthews, will try and jump away again and force the other riders to chase him down. And everybody's going to look at Peter Sagan now, because Peter Sagan has announced what his tactics are.
Yeah. There's nothing hidden with Peter Sagan. He might as well have emailed them all and said, this is what I'm going to do in the closing 4 kilometres, just so long as you know. And pretty much that involves sitting on the front, setting his own pace and looking over his shoulder, weaving from side to side on the road.
And it's flattened out now, basically. It's on this road now to the finish. They have a couple of a right-hander and left-hander in the last K, but now you can see Peter Sagan's in that position again. He's just sitting there on the front, looking over his shoulder as if they're 500 metres from the finish line. It's very strange. Daryl Impey probably will drop off the back, get some momentum, and try and jump off and force Peter Sagan to go.
This is turning into a track race at this point. They've still got a big advantage over that chase group behind, containing Vincenzo Nibali, so there's no immediate danger of this group getting caught, but they're slowing right up.
Van Avermaet knows that Daryl Impey's going to go, so he was just...
Well, Impey goes and Sagan reacts, of course. We've seen this 3 times now. Impey has attacked for the 3rd time, Matthews has reacted to Sagan for the 3rd time, and Boassenhagen tries to get onto the wheel of the Australian for the 3rd time. We've seen this pattern now over and over again, 3 kilometres remaining. And the pace goes out again, and now Sagan looks over his shoulder again, and still they're all there. So if he really believed that he would be able to drop any of these riders on the climb or the descent, it hasn't worked, and now the world champion really does have a conundrum on his hands. Or can he just sprint away from them all in the final 500 or 400 metres?
I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. He's riding there. He stays on the left-hand side of the road, so that means nobody can attack him on the left, so he's just got one place to look. So he just keeps flicking his look to the right, because he knows that's the only place they can come from, and he's just going to do that now for the next 2 Ks. But to think that he considers he can lead this out with Michael Matthews, who's an amazing sprinter, Edvald Boassenhagen, Dumoulin, who's got a track record from winning from small groups, Greg Van Avermaet, who's a fantastic sprinter as well, Impey again at the back, probably going to go again. Yes, here we go, Impey goes again.
And he chooses a moment at which Peter Sagan has decided to have something to eat as well. He reached into his back pocket and, well, he's had a drink of water, and now I think he's got a gel in his mouth as well. It's absolutely extraordinary. Impey's 4th attack.
The mind game that he just played there, Peter Sagan, he saw him coming, was just sprinting next to him, looking at him, like saying, is that all you've got? It's but now Daryl Impey needs to get off the front. He shouldn't leave this out, which is what that would play perfectly into Peter Sagan's hands now if Daryl sits there and leads this out, because what they should do if Peter Sagan's playing that game, let him sit there, let him lead it out if he's that confident, because that's the only chance you're going to stand up beating him.
8 minutes down the road, there is no race on. But in the final 1.8 kilometres, there's an absolutely fascinating race developing. And it has been this way ever since this group got away from the rest.
That's it. Impey has to come off the front. He shouldn't set this up for Peter Sagan. If he wants to help Michael Matthews, they should let Peter Sagan do it himself.
So Sagan happy with things at the moment. Edvald Boassenhagen, he's launched 1 attack. We haven't seen anything yet from Greg Van Avermaet. He's been sitting on the back for most of the final 15K. I wonder if he's keeping everything in reserve for one big attack.
Well, it's going to be a difficult choice for Van Avermaet, because he is a very fast sprinter, and he's renowned for winning from groups like this at the end of classics and won in stage races, and especially in those medium classics in Belgium. But up against Peter Sagan, Michael Matthews, and Peter Sagan in the form he's in, and also Edvald Boassenhagen, he might be better going at 800 metres to go. But the problem is now he knows that Daryl Impey, he's sacrificing himself for Michael Matthews, but he's also, not only is he leading out Michael Matthews, now he's leading out Peter Sagan. They should have just let Peter Sagan sit there on the front and use him up as much as possible. But at the same time, in theory, if Daryl Impey pulls off with 300 metres to go, 400 metres to go, then that does leave Peter Sagan out there hung out to dry and sets Michael Matthews up perfectly.
Impey setting a high pace. Through 1 kilometre they go. They'll turn left, right-handed, and then another left-hander before they enter the finishing few hundred metres. Sagan has a lead-out man, and it's an Orica Bike Exchange rider, Daryl Impey. Michael Matthews, his teammate, has done nothing except one thing, and that's sit on Peter Sagan's wheel. Edvard Boasson-Hagen now, the next rider in the line. Don't rule out Sam Dumoulin. He's got a very, very fast finish, the Frenchman from AG2R La Mondiale. And Greg Van Avermaet, too, we know all about him. Still, Impey is on the front, and the pace goes high. They're in the barriered section now, not far to the finish line. Who's going to be the first of the big favourites to jump? Sagan continues to look over his right shoulder. Van Avermaet right from the back. Van Avermaet closing in on the finish line. Boasson-Hagen reacts. The world champion, 3 across the road. Who has got the wheel in the front, though? Van Avermaet seems to have the lead. Edvard Boasson-Hagen, the world champion Peter Sagan, is beaten at this point. It hasn't worked out for him. It is Michael Matthews, his debut win on the Tour de France. In the end, strength in numbers for Orica Bike Exchange paid off, and Michael Matthews for Australia takes his first win on the Tour, and he does it in brilliant fashion, beating some of the best opposition in the world. And once again, Peter Sagan finds himself doing all the work and losing out.
Well, that was a brilliant sprint by Michael Matthews, and he made it look easy. So the confidence he had, it's almost as if Peter Sagan had no idea who Michael Matthews was. As Luke Durbridge comes in and he knows his teammates won, you can see the joy in his face. And in a situation like that, it's as if you've won yourself and you've put yourself on the line for your teammate and he pulls it off.
Yeah, Luke Durbridge did an awful lot of the early work in that group, getting in that 15-man group. He was the first rider to be sacrificed on the climb, the Cap 3 climb that defined today's finale, and he will be delighted that that plan paid off. Well, it took a long time for that sprint to really sort of kick off. In fact, it probably only happened in the final 200 metres. There, look, Durbridge is almost celebrating like he's won it himself. And you could argue that Matthews wouldn't necessarily have been able to do that with the effort from Luke Durbridge.
Well, I think Daryl Impey as well. That was an amazing ride for Impey.
Yeah.
Attacking twice, he was wearing down Sagan, and then doing the lead out, which it was hesitant whether that was the right thing to do, but because Matthews won, it was clearly the right thing to do. But Peter Sagan, and we can say it now, perhaps raced a little bit naively and was too strong and was too confident, because he was treating it like he already had the race won from a long way out, and Michael Matthews could read that pretty easily, and from about 10-15 k's out glued himself to Peter Sagan's wheel with one thing. He only had one thing that he wanted to do, and that was get to the finish on Sagan's wheel and beat him in the sprint, and his teammates facilitated that for him. He didn't have to think of anything else. He just let his teammates do all the work and make sure it kept together and make sure they wore out Sagan as much as possible.
Well, what a result that is for Michael Matthews. Won 2 stages of Paris-Nice earlier on this year and didn't finish outside the top 5 on the first 5 stages of the race. Absolutely brilliant from him, as Damiano Caruso, also one of the 15 riders in that breakaway from BMC, sprints for the minor places. And that is a big statement from Michael Matthews. He has joined the big time, there's no doubt about that now. The 25-year-old brought down in that horrible crash that did for Michael Mercure, the first rider to abandon, way back on stage 1. But, well, he's getting his rewards for battling through the pain now on the Tour de France. 2-time winner on the Giro d'Italia, 3 stages of the Vuelta as well, and he's won himself a stage on every Grand Tour now after today's victory. Well, they're having a little battle for the minor places as Caruso rolls over the line in, what, 8th place, I believe? And Gorka Izagirre fancies 9th. Yeah, why not? Top 10, that matters, on a stage of the Tour de France. Landa and Nibali less bothered. They roll over the last of the breakaway riders. And Luke Rowe gets on the front with Vasil Kirienka, Ian Stannard, and the yellow jersey of Chris Froome, who's had a trouble-free passage out of the Pyrenees and takes his slender advantage in the general classification. One would imagine, unless anything untoward befalls them between here and the finish line, they've got 5 kilometres still to race.
Well, that's been a good day for Team Sky, because although they had to control the race on the first climb and keep it fairly stable and steady for Chris Froome, the rest of the day they've been able to sit on the other teams. First of all, Katusha, then IAM, then Direct Energy. So they've effectively had what could have been a long and wearing day for them has turned into a reasonably steady day.
Damiano Caruso, who looked very determined to drop the rest of that group with Nibali and Mikel Landa, I wonder if some of the motivation might be the fact that he's jumped up the general classification. He started the day 12 minutes and 13 seconds down on the yellow jersey, the best placed of those 15 riders the BMC man. And this group are over 8 minutes down, so he's going to be within 4 minutes of the race lead, and an interesting proposition that might be for BMC, potentially. Certainly he looked intent on getting every second on the road that he possibly could there.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it still puts him, as we've seen from the mountain days, and in fact he's lost that time. He's probably going to lose a lot of time again when it comes to mountains, but you know, each rider has their own personal ambitions, and maybe he does want to move himself up as much in the GC as possible.
What do you think about the way the Pyrenees played out for the big GC men now? The dust has settled on it all after a rest day, David. I mean, it is incredibly tight still, and yet you do have the sense that beneath the surface of what looks like a very congested top 10 in the GC, there really are only two big players for the top spot in the podium in the yellow jersey in Paris.
Yeah, it's amazing to think we've got through the Pyrenees and there's only 1 minute, 1 second separating the top 10 riders, which is fairly unprecedented to be honest. And I think if we look at the top three, they're within 19 seconds. And so it's all to play for still. And I'm sure that Chris Froome would have preferred to have more time.
Not the result he would have wanted, Steve Cummings today, and he's disappointed actually. Long day out and an aggressive ride from him again. Didn't work out for his teammate either, Edvald Boasson-Hagen. Edged out by Matthews on the line.
Well, I'm sure that little sign of disappointment was for the fact that his teammate hadn't won, because I'm sure he'd have loved Boasson-Hagen to win the stage.
Well, yeah. He was asked the other day, actually, after his stage win, about the extraordinary success that his team are enjoying with Mark Cavendish's 3 wins and his win, and he said, do you know what, Edvald Boasson-Hagen hasn't even got going yet either. So that would have been an opportunity today, for sure, for Boasson-Hagen to get himself 3rd stage win on the Tour de France. It's been a number of years. It was 2011 when he made his mark back in Team Sky colours on this race. Close though, very close.
But yeah, back to the GC, it's been very interesting. I mean, we did perhaps critique Quintana a little bit for not attacking at any point, but why should he? There's still a lot of mountains to go, and I think we know that he prefers the Alps and he prefers those longer climbs, and I think that on Thursday, the Mont Ventoux stage, it's the first time we might see him actually move off the front of the race, if he can. And I think we're going to have a completely different race in the Alps, because it was almost, and this does sound a little bit crazy to say, the Pyrenees perhaps weren't the hardest mountain stages well, as hard as they have been in the past, and there was no big summit finish. But the Arcalis was one, but that's a climb that's always been renowned for not really splitting up a race, because it's a big road and it came at the end of a hard stage, and then there was the weather and the winds, which had a big effect on that. So I think we're going to see a big shake-up come Ventoux already.
There's been a big shake-up in the green jersey competition today. Still waiting for confirmation of just exactly where Peter Sagan finished in that sprint. Haven't had that confirmed yet. I should imagine some of those wheels are quite tight and difficult to separate in that result, so when we get that we'll give it to you. But he will undoubtedly have made a major mark in the green jersey competition. We think that Peter Sagan probably finished 2nd, but as I say, not confirmed yet. He definitely won the intermediate sprint though, so he's picked up a huge number of points and will take a big lead in the green jersey competition on the day. So it looks like it's Matthews from Peter Sagan, Edvald Boasson-Hagen in 3rd place, and Greg van Avermaet in 4th, with Dumoulin in 5th place. That's what we believe.
But an interesting choice by Van Avermaet to launch that sprint as well. He can come right from the back from 6th place, and yeah, that was a bit of his. I'd have thought he'd been better attacking before, or being better placed for the sprint, because he kind of set himself up. He launched the sprint, and the moment everybody saw him go, that set everyone else off, and they were already in front of him.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the best place for him to be in. But then again, we saw Michael Matthews, and we'd love to see the helicopter shot of that, the overhead, to see just how fast he dropped right back and then just made it look so easy, to be honest with you. So he did ride a much cleverer race than Peter Sagan.
Well, as you can see, not long now until the yellow jersey group reaches the finish line as well. 8 minutes and nearly 9 minutes down on the race winner, Michael Matthews. So Damiano Caruso will lift himself up to within about 3 minutes in the end of the race lead. Almost a good day for BMC, but Greg van Avermaet misreading that sprint, really. Backing himself from a long way out and not able to deliver in that kind of company. No disgrace though to lose out to Michael Matthews, Peter Sagan and Edvald Boasson-Hagen. That was a powerful group. So over they come. Richie Porte alongside the yellow jersey of Chris Froome, who's had another untroubled, unruffled, very smooth passage through another stage of the Tour de France, and closer with every passing day to his major ambition in July of clocking a third, as there's a faux sprint for 16th place, a third Tour de France victory for Chris Froome. So this is the helicopter shot you're talking about, David.
Yeah, look at it. It was just huge. So much better than everybody else.
Yeah, Sagan lunging past Edvald Boasson-Hagen to get himself second place. As his run of second places continues, Peter Sagan. He's clocked up so many in his career. As we look down on the Bastide of Revel, and some purple fireworks.
Those are some mighty fine scalps that Michael Matthews has taken there. It's to win your first stage and win it in such a fashion against riders who, like we said, 20 k's out when Sagan already split it up, it was almost impossible to call it. Each one of them having very similar attributes and all being renowned for winning from moves like that. So to then do it, it really puts him up there as at the highest level in cycling now. Although he's already there, but
yeah,
this moves him up to the next level once more.
We understand he might be on the move next year. There's certainly rumours that he might be going to Giant Alpecin, but all that to come. This is he won this bike race, and he did win it, in fact, ultimately in emphatic style for his team. Orica Bike Exchange played a blind up. 3 men in the move and 1 man better than everyone else on the finish line. Had one tactic, and that was sit on the world champion's wheel, and when it matters, get past him. And he duly did. All that effort paid off then for Michael Matthews. He will be tasting the air at the top step of the podium on the Tour de France for the very first time, and when his career, whenever it does, comes to an end, he'll always remember Revel, where it all began for him on the Tour de France. Well, it was a fascinating race. At times we thought it might be a bunch sprint. In the end, though, a group of the very best got to the finish line, and Michael Matthews delivered the win. And we look at Edvald Boasson-Hagen opening up his sprint, and Michael Matthews sweeping past him, with Peter Sagan closing the gap for second place. Once again, the world champion edged out.
See, there you go. All it takes is one visit from the England rugby coach, and the Australians start winning. Eddie Jones turns up on stage 9 the day before yesterday. Orica take their first win today. We'll take a break. There we are, the new sponsor's name. First Tour de France stage win for Michael Matthews. First Tour de France stage win for the newly named Orica Bike Exchange. There is the official results. Michael Matthews ahead of Peter Sagan, who picks up 45 points in the green jersey competition, so he'll be pretty satisfied with his day's work. Edvald Boasson-Hagen third. Greg van Avermaet, who kicked off the sprint, fourth in the end. Then Samuel Dumoulin, Daryl Impey, who rode brilliantly well for his teammate, Luke Durbridge, who had plenty of time to celebrate as he came in behind that little sprinting group, Damiano Caruso, Gorka Izahirre and Tony Gallopin, the remains of the day's breakaway, coming in well behind that sprint. All right, we've seen him do it. Let's hear what he has to say about it. Here's Michael Matthews.
Michael, 2 years ago you didn't make it to the start. Last year you were caught up in one of the biggest crashes. Today you're a stage winner of the Tour de France.
Oh, it's unbelievable. The emotion at the moment, it's just sinking in. I actually just won a stage of the Tour de France after two really bad years of this race, and yeah, I was really close to giving in on this race. I just thought this race maybe is not for me. I'd maybe just focus on other races, but yeah, today my dreams came true.
Your team today were incredible. 3 in the breakaway. Luke Durbridge, Daryl Impey, both did incredible jobs to deliver you to your victory.
Yeah, that was never the plan to go in the breakaway. We were hoping to have a bunch sprint in the finish after that hard climb coming into the final. But yeah, we have such a strong group of guys here, and the way that we work as a team whoever's up on that day, we give that rider 110%. And you could see Luke Durbridge and Daryl Impey today. They gave me their everything, and it's just no words.
Congratulations, enjoy the moment.
Thank you very much.
Well, he did all right. He had quite a few words for a man with no words. And, I mean, it's funny, the Tour, isn't it? You can be a great sprinter, but, you know, if you crash out before you even get to the start and you have bad luck and illness, you know, it can really put a damper on your Tour career. You think you'll never win a stage.
Yeah, and you've got to get yourself into the position, of course, in the first place. There's an awful lot of prep work for that one moment's opportunity. But you could see on the climb that he was the man there. He could tell by the cadence. It was a really low cadence, and he was comfortably following and real good acceleration. Van Avermaet, you could see, normally he'd be the person at that stage, but he was already heavy-legged. Peter Sagan was his own team. Incredible watching him ride today. He just did every job himself. Yeah. And to be honest, even if he'd ridden differently, I don't think he was going to best Matthews today.
No, and we can see if we take a look at the final kilometres, it really was 3 against 1, wasn't it? And Sagan, almost whatever he'd have done, it wouldn't have changed the result.
And I think he knew that. I mean, they rode it absolutely beautifully. I mean, they used Durbridge up to make sure that they stayed away and stopped everybody else attacking. Impey did exactly the right thing with his early attacks, then switched to lead-out man.
Well, here, though, it seemed like a mistake that Impey was giving Sagan a little rest by leading him out there.
He did, yeah, but that was the lesser of evils, really. If he backed off any more, the others would have started to attack, and Matthews, who's their best card, would have possibly lost his opportunity or had to chase. I think Van Avermaet actually possibly missed a trick. He didn't have the form, but here he had an opportunity to really lay off at the back and be coming at them in the shadow on their left-hand side and then start to sprint. But he started to accelerate off the wheel, so he lost the opportunity that he studiously guarded this back position, didn't max it out, kept going quite strongly to the line. Peter Sagan had a few different goes to try and find a way through, but I think the best two sprinters got first and second there. Matthews clearly the sharpest, Sagan just incredible.
And Sagan, I think I might have said there were 50 points on the line today. Of course, it wasn't an ordinary flat stage, only 30 because it's a medium mountain stage. Picking up 20 at the intermediate sprint and 25 on the line for second place. Matthews got the 30. That's 45 points. That's a fantastic day out for him in the green jersey.
Well, we said before the stage that he's running out of opportunities, really, to find one that he can get over the climbs and get rid of Cavendish but still be there himself for the finish. And it was a really important day, and he took it by the scruff of the neck, didn't he? At the start of the day, forced himself into a breakaway on the climb, attacked and attacked. If he doesn't get most aggressive rider today, then there's something wrong for sure.
Was the fact that Edvald Boasson didn't contest the intermediate sprint with him, is that confirmation of what Mark Cavendish has been saying all along, that he's actually not interested in the green jersey for Paris?
Well, I don't really know. I mean, I think personally they were just focusing on stage wins at that point, and they knew that they could have challenged him, but they weren't going to beat him. The only person who could have done, of course, was Matthews, but he had his sights set on the stage win, which is exactly what he got.
Okay, so the green jersey then for Peter Sagan, he'll be getting that in a few minutes' time. He's also the most aggressive rider of the day, only one choice really, and we will see the podium presentations after the break. Welcome back. There's Chris Froome crossing the line with a big grin on his face, probably because of a joke being cracked, but he could be smiling anyway because it's about as uneventful as a day in the general classification as you could possibly have. Absolutely no change. Froome, Yates, Martin, Quintana, Rodriguez, Mollema, Bardet, Henao, Meintjes and Valverde with exactly the same time gaps they had this morning. Michael Matthews and the rest of the breakaway group were always too far down to be any threat to the GC. That's why they were allowed to get away. And he had a lot of help. Peter Sagan was against 3 men from Orica Bike Exchange, and the Orica Bike Exchange 3 won out. Let's hear from Luke Durbridge, who worked so hard for that Matthews win.
Luke Durbridge, that was a tactical masterpiece by Orica Green Edge.
Yeah, well, I guess sometimes when it plays out like that, you could say it's a tactical masterpiece. So we're pretty happy with that, and we targeted this stage for a while, and to nail it like the way we did. But it takes full commitment from everyone. You know, everyone was from kilometre 0 to the finish. So yeah, we're pretty happy with that. If it doesn't always come together, but when it does, it's pretty special.
An awful lot of fast guys in that group at the end. It was difficult to know which guy to watch. Were you confident Matthew was going to win that?
I think so, because we had Matthews has obviously done a little bit less than Sagan and Greg Van Avermaet, so and Bolsenhagen, so I think he'd done a little bit less and saved the legs a little bit, and I mean, he still has to do it, you know, he still has to have the legs to do it, so but I think Sagan helped us out there a fair bit and split the group, and then we had 3 in the front 7, so that was pretty good.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Well, it was tactically excellent, wasn't it, Chris, from Orica? Although it helps when you have 3 against 1. And I suppose, as strong as he was when Peter Sagan broke up that group, the bad news for him was that all 3 Orica guys were on the right side of it.
Well, break it up. You can't tell who it is you're going to be left with once you've made your move, and it just didn't work out that way. But I think he was focusing completely on green today. The win would have been a bonus, but he was all about trying to get points and making sure he got the most secure way to gain the most points, and that was right in the way he did, I think, keeping it together and bringing it down to a sprint. One of the most consistent sprinters in the world, if not the best.
Yeah. Yep, he got the sprint win. Peter Sagan got the green jersey. Let's get over and catch up with the presentations with Ned.
Well, bling by name, bling by nature. Michael Matthews knows what it's like to be a Tour de France stage winner for the first time. Emotional, crossing the line and taking this win after a difficult relationship with the Tour de France, where misfortune has dogged his young career to this date. But now it's all come together. And what makes this victory exceptionally pleasing is the company that he's dispatched to be on the top step of the podium. No mean feat to edge out Peter Sagan on the form that he's in, but that's exactly what Michael Matthews did. And I'm sure that when he reflects, he'll have to acknowledge the effort, and indeed he did, played by his teammates there, because they played that tactic to absolute perfection. It's easier said than done sometimes to get it right on the day, but they certainly did.
No, they did, and especially when we heard from the interview that wasn't the plan for today. They were hoping that the bunch get whistled down and they could then play the final for a bunch sprint for Michael Matthews, which just goes to show how confident he is in his sprint. But to see the way they adapted their tactics and applied them perfectly, and that's always something that's easy to do when you've got a leader like Michael Matthews who is that confident in their ability and that cool-headed. We saw what he did. He never got worked up. He just sat on Peter Sagan and played Peter Sagan perfectly.
It's another career second place for Peter Sagan, but he's already worn the yellow jersey and taken a stage win so far on the Tour de France, so he won't be that disappointed, I don't think. However, the world champion should be accused of a little bit of, how would you best put it?
Overconfidence.
Overconfidence, coupled with a bit of naivety and a little bit too much swagger in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easily done.
And it's easily done for Chris Froome as well, another day in yellow, and just worked out perfectly for him. This is a very, very untroubled Tour de France so far, and there are 10 stages notched off. After tomorrow, he'll have passed the halfway point from Mont Saint-Michel to Paris. In terms of stages anyway, but so much big climbing and big tests and 2 time trials still to come for Chris Froome. For now, though, this is perfect, and another day in yellow awaits the leader of Team Sky as he tries to win the Tour de France for the 3rd time.
Yeah, it was a very, very easy day for Chris Froome. There were some crosswinds to deal with, and Sky were instantly there, taking him to the front. Nairo Quintana looked like he was fending a little bit for himself.
Yeah, it is very exposed here in the fields in the run-in, and everyone knew there might be some crosswinds, and it had quite an effect on the race. Sagan used it to actually break up that group. He used it to force the split to 6. But back in the other effect that he hadn't foreseen is they were starting to really eat into the lead, other riders thinking about the stage, and actually that switched them to defensive riding. Everybody lined up and was worried about the crosswinds, what could happen, so it pretty much shut down the peloton.
Yeah, which of course is great news if you're in the yellow jersey. Let's hear from him now. He's talking to Matt.
Chris, well, that turned out to be straightforward enough, but there was a puff of wind, and suddenly there you were behind Ian Stannard, Kirienka, Geraint Thomas, Lucro. What a team. You must feel pretty comfortable in the hot seat there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was talk of a little bit of crosswind coming into the last 30 Ks there, so you could see the whole peloton getting nervous behind. But again, the guys did a great job just keeping me up front, just in case things were to kick off. We were right there and pretty much ready for it if it did happen.
And for the man that everyone's looking at, with all that pressure on your shoulders, you seem pretty relaxed today. There were a number of times we saw you laughing. On the finish line, you leant over and had a word with Richie Port.
Yeah, I mean, this is the dream. This is what it's all about, to be in yellow, and it's a pretty special feeling. I'm gonna soak it up and enjoy it while I'm here.
Can you already see Mont Ventoux on the horizon? That's already figuring large in your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, tomorrow we're hoping for another similar kind of day like today. Just another day we can tick off and get through, hopefully without too much happening. But then, yeah, Ventoux is definitely the next big thing we've got our sights on now.
Well, the best of luck to you. Thanks very much, Chris.
Thanks a lot. It's a massive climb. It's one of the most iconic climbs this race has.
Everyone I spoke to said it's bloody hard. If I get there and there's no big break up the road and I'm feeling good, I can try something.
When I got to the top last time, I had to get onto oxygen support. I was so tired.
Last time we went up with Ventoux, Quintana attacked. If that happens again, that's perfect for me.
Sería bonito ganar ahí. Alguna vez hice segundo, esta vez quisiera ganar.
To win up there again would just be unreal, be out of this world.
Should be a fabulous stage, and we have it Thursday live at 2 on ITV4. Yes, as Chris Froome says, tomorrow another sprinter stage. May well see Cavendish up there trying to retake the green jersey, so that'll be well worth watching. But the one we're all looking for is Ventoux. Is Quintana going to make a move? Can Dan Martin protect his position? Can Adam Yates protect his position?
Well, Adam Yates is the one I think we're all quite excited by, because there's somebody just starting out as a Tour contender. I mean, I think he earned that right now. He's really aggressive, got nothing to lose. What a place to see what you can do, Mont Ventoux.
And Quintana, I mean, people say, all right, he likes the Alpine climbs more, they suit him more for attacking, but there are only 2 mountain top finishes in the Alps. He has to do something Thursday, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, he almost had to do something before now. He's been chipped away at, and he's a few seconds in arrears now. Froome's in the perfect position. He's got to use these opportunities. I was surprised we didn't see anything before the rest day, to be honest. There's lots of climbing, but as you say, it's those summit finishes he needs, and not a one-trick pony, but it's very much his strongest card, particularly with a not so strong team.
Yeah. There is Adam Yates, by the way, on the podium getting the white jersey. He's got a fight on his hands with Louis Meintjes for that. Do you think he's that bothered about the white jersey? I mean, he's showing himself to be a man who can compete with the very best. So the white jersey would be nice, but it's a bit of a side issue.
I think it would be exactly that, a side effect of him riding well. He'll stay with the group, and when he gets to the top, you'll see who's left and what position he's in. But right now, if I was him, I'd be going after the podium. Everything will be about that. Ventoux is going to be a massive test for him, because that has to be the biggest battleground we've seen so far.
Well, now talking about the podium, Dan Martin is currently on the 3rd step. It would be sensational if he was still there in Paris. What do you expect from him on Ventoux? Because he's a man who says, I'll attack because I like to attack, even if I end up conceding time. So he's not riding with a long-term aim, but he's up there regardless.
Yeah, and all of these things, I mean, just to move slightly sideways, all of these things play into Chris Froome's hand, because while they're fighting over a podium place because they've never been there before, they are effectively working for him, monitoring moves. So those 2 are going to fight it out, but it'll still be a brilliant, I think, side battle to watch.
Now then, Ventoux is a huge stage on Thursday, but there is, as I say, a sprinters stage tomorrow. There it is, a proper flat stage tomorrow, one of 2 this side of Paris, 162.5 kilometres setting out from Carcassonne, with just a pair of 4th category speed bumps inside the first 60. And that's about that. The intermediate sprint comes at 113 kilometres. That should be contested by the day's breakaway, but the break will almost certainly have been caught by the time the race reaches Montpellier. 2 p.m. for live coverage of stage 11, 7 for the highlights, and of course ITV.com for everything in between, including the podcast. So, yellow jersey on Thursday, back to the green jersey tomorrow. Peter Sagan took it from Mark Cavendish today. Cav has the chance to take it back. We will be back with highlights of this stage at 7 o'clock tonight. See you then.